Your interest? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I briefed you a little bit on this one.
Your interest?
And Mr. Van de Vendel. He had asked that we. Yeah, thank you, Worship. I briefed you a little bit on this one.
Your interest?
Mr. Van de Vendel. Is a candidate. He had asked that we. Thank you, Worship. I briefed you a little bit on this one. Mr. Van de Vendel is a candidate. He had asked that we. Thank you, Worship. I briefed you a little bit on this one. Mr. Van de Vendel is a candidate. He had asked that we. Thank you, Worship. I briefed you a little bit on this one. Mr. Van de Vendel is a candidate. He had asked that we. Thank you, Worship. I briefed you a little bit on this one. Mr. Van de Vendel is a candidate. He had asked that we. Thank you, Worship. I briefed you a little bit on this one. Mr. Van de Vendel is a candidate. He had asked that we. Thank you, Worship. I briefed you a little bit on this one. Mr. Van de Vendel is a candidate. He had asked that we. Thank you, Worship. I briefed you a little bit on this one. Mr. Van de Vendel is a candidate. He had asked that we. Thank you, Worship. I briefed you a little bit on this one. Mr. Van de Vendel is a candidate. He had asked that we. Thank you, Worship. I briefed you a little bit on this one. Mr. Van de Vendel is a candidate. He had asked that we. Thank you, Worship. I briefed you a little bit on this one. Mr. Van de Vendel is a candidate. He had asked that we. Thank you, Worship. I briefed you a little bit on this one. Mr. Van de Vendel is a candidate. He had asked that we. Thank you, Worship. I briefed you a little bit on this one. Mr. Van de Vendel is a candidate. He had asked that we. Thank you, Worship. I briefed you a little bit on this one. Mr. Van de Vendel is a candidate. He had asked that we. Thank you, Worship. I briefed you a little bit on this one. Mr. Van de Vendel is a candidate. He had asked that we. Thank you, Worship. I briefed you a little bit on this one. Mr. Van de Vendel is a candidate. He had asked that we. Thank you, Worship. I briefed you a little bit on this one. Mr. Van de Vendel is a candidate. He had asked that we. Thank you, Worship. I briefed you a little bit on this one. Mr. Van de Vendel.
Thank you, Mayor. You're good to resume the meeting.
Okay, very good. So then we did dispense with item 3.1 with everybody voting in favor.
Thank you, Mayor. You're good to resume the meeting.
We'll go to 4.1. Okay, very good. Main Street Action Plan. So then we did dispense with item 3.1 with introduce that. Everybody voting in favor.
Thank you, Mayor. You're good to resume the meeting.
To 4.1. Very good. Main Street Action Plan. So then we did dispense with item 3.1 with introduce that. Everybody voting in favor.
Thank you, Mayor. You're good to resume the meeting.
To 4.1. Very good. Main Street Action Plan. So then we did dispense with item 3.1 with introduce that. Everybody voting in favor.
Thank you, Mayor. You're good to resume the meeting.
To 4.1. Very good. Main Street Action Plan. So then we did dispense with item 3.1 with introduce that. Everybody voting in favor.
Thank you, Mayor. You're good to resume the meeting.
To 4.1. Very good. Main Street Action Plan. So then we did dispense with item 3.1 with introduce that. Everybody voting in favor.
Thank you, Mayor. You're good to resume the meeting.
To 4.1. Very good. Main Street Action Plan. So then we did dispense with item 3.1 with introduce that. Everybody voting in
Thank you,
favor.
Mayor. You're good to resume the meeting.
To 4.1. Very good. Main Street Action Plan. So then we did dispense with item 3.1 with introduce that. Everybody voting in
Thank you,
favor.
Mayor. You're good to resume the meeting.
To 4.1. Very good. Main Street Action Plan. So then we did dispense with item 3.1 with introduce that. Everybody voting in
Thank you,
favor.
Mayor. You're good to resume the meeting.
To 4.1. Very good. Main Street Action Plan. So then we did dispense with item 3.1 with introduce that. Everybody voting in
Thank you,
favor.
Mayor. You're good to resume the meeting.
To 4.1. Very good. Main Street Action Plan. So then we did dispense with item 3.1 with introduce that. Everybody voting in
Thank you,
favor.
Mayor. You're good to resume the meeting.
To 4.1. Very good. Main Street Action Plan. So then we did dispense with item 3.1 with introduce that. Everybody voting in
Thank you,
favor.
Mayor. You're good to resume the meeting.
To 4.1. Very good. Main Street Action Plan. So then we did dispense with item 3.1 with introduce that. Everybody voting in
Thank you,
favor.
Mayor. You're good to resume the meeting.
To 4.1. Very good. Main Street Action Plan. So then we did dispense with item 3.1 with introduce that. Everybody voting in
Thank you,
favor.
Mayor. You're good to resume the meeting.
To 4.1. Very good. Main Street Action. So I'll call declare the public hearing open, and I'm Kim Craig. I'm the chair of the meeting. All comments will be directed through to me, and the people that wish to speak to this matter will be asked to identify themselves, and if they do not wish to identify themselves, then they will not be allowed to address the matter. They would be allowed up to 5 minutes, no more than 5 minutes to speak on the matter, and the comment should be salient to the matter before us, the particular item, and people speaking should not repeat anything that was brought up earlier in their comments as possible. If there's any new information that you might ask, that might be made available to the legislative coordinator if necessary. And so with that, I will move on and open the floor to administration to introduce the public hearing matter.
Thank you. Just want to confirm everyone can hear me okay?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah.
Good. And everyone can see the PowerPoint presentation that's been loaded up on the screen?
Yes.
Great. So yeah, it's Cameron Mills here with the Planning and Development Department, and it's my privilege to speak to you today, Council, with respect to this matter. What we're considering here is Bylaw 825-P-09-21. We have a public hearing this evening and consideration potentially for second and or third reading of the bylaw, and this is with respect to a proposed rezoning within an area described as the South Coaldale area, structure plan area. So I'm going to present administration's information with respect to this, and then we also have the proponent, or some representatives of the proponent that are here to speak. And then I'll also be presenting some correspondence that I had received that was asked to be read into the record on behalf of someone that wanted to provide some correspondence, so I'll provide that during the appropriate time of the hearing. Getting right into it, So again, what we're here today to consider is Bylaw 825P0921, and that is for rezoning of lands within the South Coaldale Area Structure Plan area. You'll recall that the South Coaldale Area Structure Plan was approved during the regular meeting of Council in July of 2021, so just earlier this year. And really what we're looking at is rezoning lots that are either currently zoned urban reserve or country residential 2, and rezoning those to reclassify the area as being both residential R1A, which is sort of the standard single family residential zoning, as well as multifamily R2 zoning. Just for some clarity with respect to anyone who might be watching the hearing and may not be familiar with the development process. So what we have, to go from sort of A to Z to get a new area of town built. So we had an area structure plan, which was presented to council. So first of all, there were multiple forms of public consultation that were done, principally led by the developer, which informed the design of the plan over a period of several months. And then once that plan was designed, following that public consultation, the developer brought that forward to council for council's consideration. And again, a public hearing was included as part of that consideration, where people had an opportunity to voice concerns or questions with respect to that proposed plan. And ultimately, the plan that was finally adopted was done so by council in July of 2021. We're now at the rezoning step, which again is a section of the process where this goes before council. And really what we're looking at is redesignation of lots within that plan area in accordance with the land use concepts that are proposed as part of that area structure plan. And this is prior to detailed design for next steps of the development process. And once rezoning is complete, we move to the subdivision step, where a developer will prepare far more detailed drawings to ultimately create lots, and that will include submissions of detailed engineering design and other sort of more technical data associated with construction. And subdivision, if it's approved, is approved conditional on a number of things. So the Municipal Planning Commission has an opportunity to put conditions on subdivision, and conditions have to be met prior to registration or the creation of those lots. And so a development agreement would almost certainly be included in that, as well as any other number of conditions that the developer would have to satisfy prior to engaging in construction works. And then construction would occur, and then prior to buildings being built, they'd obviously need to follow the development permit process, which is done jointly through the Municipal Planning Commission and administration. And that process regulates design and construction of the actual dwelling units. So we're currently at phase 2 here, having already completed phase 1, but in advance of that detailed design subdivision work that takes place next. So just pulling a couple of things out of the presentation that was made in July that are relevant to this matter. So this is a slide that was presented as part of that. And really what is proposed in the area structure plan, and this is a map that comes from the area structure plan, is fundamentally a section that has 2 areas: a low density area shown as highlighted in purple to the south, and then a medium density area above that in orange. In this conceptual design, and again, we're not approving a number of lots here, but we're saying to meet that low density requirement, we're taking a look at an R1A zoning, and in this design, we're showing 54 lots. And then to the north of that, we're showing that R2 zoning to meet that medium density requirement. In this case, what we're showing in this example is 8 lots south of proposed 27th Avenue, which would accommodate 3 and 4-plex style units, and then 3 lots to the north of that in the northernmost section of the plan, showing those low-rise apartment buildings. There's also a space for some seniors housing, which I believe is 12 units. That is also in the R1A designation, so it's the same as the purple, but it's highlighted here to show the difference because the intention of that is the seniors housing. And just one more thing to show here, we also have consideration for open space, so that needs to be understood. Because when you look at how this plan was designed, and as it was based on feedback received by the developer throughout their public consultation, what they really heard was a preference from the community to accommodate higher densities north of the plan. And that satisfied some of the folks in the southernmost areas, but then also meets some of the requirements or some of the recommendations that come out of the town plan in terms of locating medium density close to schools and close to walking trails and things like that. So obviously I have benefits from being on the north there. But we also have this open space. We have some park area. We'll have some amenity space surrounding the storm pond, which is located in the northeast corner on the plan. Now, the detailed design of the storm plan would be accommodated at a later step, but this shows the general area proposed for that stormwater accumulation area. And then also a buffer space to the south to separate the low density area from the existing homeowners to the south. And so that will be included also at a later step, but I just wanted to include that for clarification. When you look at the proposal we're looking at here, so to the left, you see that map we were looking at from the area structure plan, and in brown, in hashed, that is the area that is being considered for rezoning today. The area structure plan incorporates a broader plan for the larger area, but the individual applicant is applying for these areas because this is the area that would be proposed to be developed in accordance with that plan. And to the right, you'll see from the circulation the area that is being proposed. So you'll notice that it's fairly confusing because there are a few different zonings, but what you ultimately see is that the area south to the south here listed at B2 is being changed from country residential 2, or proposed to be changed from country residential 2 to R1A. And this section in the top left of the area is also being proposed for R1A. And then this rectangular nub, if you will, is also being proposed for R1A. Those will be single family lots that ultimately back on to the proposed storm pond. The rest, the hashed area, if you will, is being proposed for rezoning to that medium density R2 designation. So we did have an opportunity to circulate the notice, and we did receive some feedback. So we circulated the notice directly to adjacent landowners through a mail out. We also posted this on Let's Connect Coaldale, our social media linked platform. We advertised it via our website and social media channels. And we also advertised the public hearing in the Sunny South News. And we did receive through the Let's Connect platform 3 comments or questions, if you will. So I'll just address those quickly here. So the first one generally was concerns about a proposal for construction of the subdivision proceeding prior to upgrades of, it was listed at 17th Avenue, but I suspect it's 17th Street that they're referring to here. So just to address that, I want to make it very clear. Again, this is one step of many in the process. Council will likely recall the South Coaldale Transportation upgrades conversation that occurred with the community and with Council back in the spring and summer. And so if you come back to the June 14th and June 28th Council meetings, there was an opportunity for consideration of the broader South Coaldale Transportation Network. And Council made some motions at those meetings that really sort of addressed this exact concern. And then what we did is we sent out a letter dated July 2nd to the stakeholders from that group to explain what Council's decisions were with respect to that. And we posted that letter on the Let's Connect platform for folks to read if they didn't receive the letter directly. But I'm just going to read really quickly number 3 of the 3 components of the motion. So that Council move that no further multi-lot subdivision and development take place in the South Coaldale area, excluding the seasons, until 17th Street is reconstructed as an urban cross-section, similar to the cross-section that was presented at the June 14th, 2021 Council meeting, which includes widened driving lanes and the introduction of a multi-use pathway at a minimum. Further, be it resolved that should a multi-lot subdivision be approved, a developer would be required to pay for their proportionate share of the redevelopment of 17th Street to distribute the cost of the project equitably. To this end, and in anticipation of future growth and development of the area, administration is further directed to put out for tender the development of a preliminary design for the reconstruction of 17th Street as an urban cross-section as described above. So I think, in short, that motion that Council's already made back in June really clarifies the fact that this is something that will take place prior to the approval of any construction. Again, what we're considering here tonight is simply rezoning. It is not authorizing any construction. Construction would not be authorized until after all of the conditions of subdivision are met. And this is making very clear from Council that the expectation is that this issue is addressed concretely prior to that occurring. So That addresses that concern from an administration standpoint. Second, there was a concern relating to the requirement for an environmental assessment for the area prior to construction, specifically with respect to burrowing owl population. So again, this is the type of thing where we're looking at a technical requirement that makes the most sense as part of the subdivision process, where you have an opportunity to attach conditions for council or for consideration in municipal planning commission. So you have an opportunity to require that either as part of the subdivision consideration or as a condition for subdivision approval, either prior to or in advance or in after having that consideration. That's something the municipal planning commission can consider at that time. Third, questions regarding the suitability of higher density uses, specifically the low-rise apartment concepts and the marketability of such uses, whether or not there's demand for these things in Coaldale, and whether or not we have studies or things like that provide for those things. Now, we don't engage in that type of work at the town in terms of doing direct studies on market demand. I can say that the most recent up-to-date figures we have in Coaldale suggest a 0% vacancy rate for our residential, which is not to say that there are no places available, but when these statistics are taken, that was the information. So that's going to vary obviously a little bit, but the reality with Coaldale is there is very little space available from a vacancy perspective, which typically is associated with multifamily spaces. So from that perspective, it's easy to suggest that there's certainly demand in Coaldale for this type of use. And then I would also suggest that we have to consider what the town plan tells us about accommodating higher density and mixed types of uses. And again, the town plan is a document that is informed with a substantial amount of public input. Consider that, this is a multi-year process to develop this plan. It was approved relatively recently. We had individual folks in town that contributed to this. We had engagement sessions. We had groups that were involved in the preparation of this, and all of that together informed a really substantial amount of public input in terms of having the residents of Coaldale tell us how they want the town to develop. And so then once that is approved, the town plan, then the planning department can use that as the guide for how we're trying to direct development within the town. And again, this is pulled directly from the town plan. It's something we discussed at the area structure plan phase, but I will point it out again. So with respect to residential development, the town plan outlines goals. And again, this is informed with a lot of public input. And it tells us that we're supposed to be supporting a diversity of housing forms and lot sizes to provide options for residents, that we're supposed to encourage housing options that cater to people of diverse abilities. We're supposed to ensure residential development makes efficient use of infrastructure and achieves densities that support the long-term prosperity of the town. What the town plan is calling for is a density in the 8 unit, I believe it's 8 unit per acre range, which does require for a mixed type of uses within these types of developments. And then if you also look at the strategies and the policies associated with meeting those goals, what does it tell us about multi-unit dwellings? Well, it tells us that multi-unit dwellings need to be dispersed throughout the community and not segregated to an individual area. It means multi-unit dwellings should be encouraged to locate in places that are within a 400-meter walking radius of downtown, for example, that are near parks, that are near trail systems and schools. And that if they're not close to green space or trails or parks, that they provide for sufficient recreation and green space on site, again, to the satisfaction of the development authority. So this informs how we go about planning for these new communities. What it's really telling us is that these new communities should have mixed types of uses. They should have single-family residential. They should also have a diverse array of multifamily types in order to accommodate the diverse array of needs that we're seeing through the town, and also to meet the town's broader goals of increasing the town's overall density as we develop these new neighborhoods. We also received feedback by mail or email, in this case, email correspondence, and the respondent has requested that administration present their letter on their behalf during the public input portion of the hearing, so I'll be happy to do so at that time. So I'm just going to skip to that for now. And so our recommendation from an administration's perspective, council can consider the following. You can pass Bylaw 825 for second and potentially third reading with or without amendments, or we can table for further consideration, or we can delete Bylaw 825 at this time. that wraps up the administration portion of the presentation. I understand the proponent is obviously prepared to speak as well, but if there's any questions of council at this time, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Yeah, I'll open the floor to council to field any questions through to administration at this time. Does council have any questions through to Cam? Councilor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Worship, and through to Cam. And I know that the developers are here as well, and so maybe they might be able to answer them. Your points, Cam, with respect to people per hectare. So I think you're advising that 30 people per hectare is either minimum or the maximum requirement. And my question to you on that one would be, does that fit into the medium density requirements for the people per hectare that area structure plan will cover? And my second question is with regards to utilities and whether questions have been asked to me about particularly with regards to sewer and how that will impact that whole area, and will you be able to have capacity? I'm not an engineer by any means, but just sort of looking at the at your map on that particular item, that some of it is fed from the Cottonwood area just straight east of, or straight west of, on 30th Avenue. So just wondered about some of those capacity questions, whether they will fulfill the purpose of this subdivision.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. So just to address some of those questions, fundamentally what we're doing this evening is the rezoning application, right? And so a lot of these higher level questions were addressed as part of that area structure plan that was considered by council and ultimately approved back in July. And now what we're doing is we're saying, okay, the developer is ready to move forward with certain sections of it, and they've applied for rezoning for those lots to meet what was laid out in the area structure plan. So I would take the position that with respect to the density and the appropriateness of the density and those types of things, that was really laid out during the previous process. What the application is looking at is to say, we're ready to move forward with these changes and we're seeking council's approval to do that. With respect to how the calculation on the per hectare basis is created, that's again something that would have been considered as part of that process. If Spencer wants to talk more specifically about that, he certainly is welcome to do so. But for the purpose of this hearing, it's really kind of beyond the scope of what we're considering. It's something we considered previously, and the calculation and really what we're now doing is saying, okay, the land use that was suggested as part of this approval is now being applied for, right? If that makes sense. And with request, again, with respect to questions about utility servicing and the appropriateness of those things as well, again, that's something that was considered at the details. The details of those things would have been considered to a certain extent as part of that area structure plan phase, and the specific engineering associated with accommodating that infrastructure will be completed as part of the next phase.
Spencer, do you want to add on, or are you okay?
I think just briefly touching on the specific questions that Councillor Chapman did ask, and again, working off of memory from the area structure plan presentation back in July, the 30 people per hectare, for instance, is an average number of people per hectare that is used to calculate sanitary capacity. And that's not just for this 20 odd acres, that's for several hundred acres in the southeast portion of Coaldale, including Cottonwood at full build out, the Seasons at full build out, Fieldstone Meadows at full build out, the 30th Avenue quarter section at full build out, and a portion of the quarter section south of Cottonwood. So that was an average used to inform infrastructure calculations. Now, ultimately, MPE Engineering, who did our infrastructure master plan, who's done modeling for the sanitary capacity in that part of the community, has confirmed for this particular development and the development that would come after the rezoning this evening, there is capacity for that type of development in the existing sanitary system.
All All right, any other members of council with questions? Okay, and then, so at this time, maybe I'd ask Cam to read out that letter that was submitted.
Thank you. So the letter comes to us from, it's from Heidi Froze, I believe is the pronunciation. I apologize if I'm incorrect there. So questions regarding proposed bylaw 825P0921, rezoning properties known legally as lots 1 and 2, Block B, Plan 49FJ. As one of the first residents in the development of Southview Estates, I've watched the development of low-density trailer court and phase 3 of the trailer court, which I believe has some multi-units, being developed with little to no roadway improvement. Now, a proposed multi-unit high-density development is to be created on the north side of Southview Estates, and again, with very little upgrades to roads and infrastructure. Coaldale has always been considered a relaxed bedroom community, inviting to families, but the area around the quads is becoming more and more congested without taking into consideration the many people and children using these roadways for walking. There are no sidewalks along any of these roadways, and the roads are very narrow. Southview Estates homes had to allow for drainage in front and back of lots, and we had to set back our homes to accommodate. Because the grade level is low, does the new development take care of drainage with setbacks, or what steps are in the plan for the developer to make sure drainage is not an issue to current residents in Southview Estates? Second, we bought our lot and developed our home on it with the understanding that what we would stay as a country residential subdivision, and all subdivisions south to the canal would either be urban reserve or country residential. At the time, the town of Coaldale plan was to put a dugout pond behind our lot for drainage. What is the lot size footage for residential R1A lots, and what type of building restrictions as per type of home, bungalow, 2-story attached garage, yard development, etc. Cottonwood, for example, requires a tree in the front yard 2 years after building of the home. Next, what is the reason behind the proposed 13th Street change, and if extending that, why not all the way up to the north? Next, please provide an explanation on why 13th Street cannot be extended over the canal. South from 24th Ave all the way to 30th Ave. Next, why would the town allow 13th Street to be extended only a portion of the way so that the developer has a second access out of the subdivision into the quads? By allowing this, trees will need to be relocated or removed and more drainage ditches filled in, which will just cause more drainage issues in this area and more traffic on roads not equipped for this type of traffic. Next, we have no sidewalks, and the current walking path would need to be modified in some way. If 13th Street is extended, children will need to cross the road to get to the path. What are the proposed change for this? Third, roadways. There are no sidewalks built for Southview Estates, the Seasons, 30th Avenue, or 17th Street. The Seasons development was to use 8th Street as the main roadway into town, with gate on the west side of the development, limiting traffic on 30th Avenue. The developer was to provide funding to pave and maintain 8th Street into town. Since that time, the gate on the west side has been removed and 8th Street was never paved into town. The same developer is now involved in this development. How can we ensure anything that is agreed upon in this new development will be fulfilled? A commitment to widen to allow foot traffic on 30th Avenue and 17th Street is required before more development should be done. Both 30th Avenue and 17th Street need to be designed wide enough to support the traffic of a multi-unit development that will occur. It is currently dangerous for a child to walk to school on those roads. Nevertheless, after more development, 2 vehicles and pedestrians cannot safely use 30th Avenue, especially when someone is also trying to retrieve their mail. In winter, I have seen more than one person slide into the ditch turning onto 17th Avenue off of 30th Street. Please provide more detailed plans. Next, how is the town going to improve access to 845 from 30th Street? There was a washed out roadway when turning east off 845 going north most of the summer, and there are no sidewalks. I look forward to your response and a clear long-term vision for the south end development of the town of Coaldale. Thank you, Heidi Froze. So there's obviously quite a bit there to address. So I'll take an opportunity to address some of it at a high level. A lot of the questions come down to things that have been discussed for several months with council and with the broader community through a number of engagement exercises, whether it was the infrastructure master plan, whether it was the South Coaldale roadway network discussions, or whether it was through the area structure plan process, either through the developer-led public consultation or through the town's public consultation on that. But with respect to the question of drainage, that's a fairly straightforward answer. So the area structure plan quite clearly provides for drainage to a developer-constructed drainage pond, very similar to how standard residential subdivisions are developed in modern times. The detailed design of that infrastructure will be done as part of the subdivision process, and isn't appropriately considered at the rezoning phase. But that is something that is clearly articulated in the area structure plan, which was reviewed by Council in a public forum and was ultimately adopted in July. With respect to the questions of the lots and landscaping and things like that, basically what's in place is that the land use bylaw has the R1A district, for example, for single family homes. That has requirements for how houses can be constructed on those types of lots. And in addition to that, we have Schedule 6 of the land use bylaw, which calls for landscaping requirements. So a requirement for 25% of a front yard to be landscaped, for a tree to be planted in the front yard, and all of those things. Anything over and above that can be done through a restrictive covenant that a developer can put in place. They're not required to do so. Developers often do that in order to improve the marketability of their lots. But the land use bylaw, the R1A district, quite clearly articulates those requirements, and all that information is available on our website. With respect to questions of infrastructure and traffic, so infrastructure and traffic flow concerns were considered quite carefully during the area structure plan phase. And also through that, again, that South Coaldale transportation network discussion that Council was actively engaged in. And I did read the third resolution from that letter, but there was a resolution again from a June 28th meeting of Council relating to the South Coaldale transportation network, which fundamentally addresses the concerns, I believe, that fundamentally addresses the concerns that were addressed by Ms. Froese here in her letter. I think I covered most of it there.
Thanks, Cam. And then we'll now call on the proponents of the development, any of their representatives that would like to speak. I think Sue Patton would like to address Council.
Yes, I'm Sue Payton with ISL Engineering. I'm here with Amanda Kaiser. Amanda had coordinated the public engagement process for the area structure plan revisions. And we can, Cameron's done such a thorough overview. We're going to be very, very quick here. On the next slide, it just shows the location, which of course we've gone through. The following slide is this just shows the revised area structure plan, the same as Cam has shown, and which was approved by Council on July 12th. And our last slide just shows here what the rezoning would be, the areas that are to be rezoned to R1A and R2, and then the purpose for those zones. And the purpose listed here is taken from your land use bylaw, so that the R1A is shown in the low density areas that were established in the area structure plan, and the R2, the residential multi-unit district, is shown in the medium density area that was established in the area structure plan. I'm not sure what I can add to what Cameron has gone through already, other than we anticipate a lot of the details that have come up tonight, of course, will be resolved through the following process of the planning process. This is just the beginning to get the land use in place to be able to start that development process. So Amanda is here if you had any questions on the engagement for the ASP. But this application that's before you tonight is just to bring the land use districts into conformance with the area structure plan that was approved in July.
Thank you, Sue. Are there any questions of Council through to the presenter? Amanda, do you have anything you want to add to Sue? Okay. All right. Is there anybody else from the proponent that would like to address council at this time? Okay, I'm hearing nothing. So, Lana, do we have any people that registered prior in accordance with the public notification to speak tonight?
Sorry, Mayor. No, I did not receive any other further interest.
So then, is Greg Smith on the call then? I see that he's been, did he pre-register and to participate, Alana?
He did not, but the ad stated that the participants had up until noon today to do so.
Okay, so that's, okay. So welcome, Greg, and so you were on the call when I introduced the public hearing and that, so it's just, you'll confirm that you're here, and can you give us your name and address and your position, please?
Greg Schmidt. I live at 1702 30th Avenue. I identify as Batman, but my wife tells me I'm Greg Schmidt, so.
And are you for or against the proposal?
Both. Some parts of it I'm for. The multi-use I am for, but not for the 3 42-unit, 3-story apartment buildings. So I've just got a few things I'll go through quickly. Want to thank you for letting us speak here today. A lot of people that I talk to around the neighborhood, they'd like to speak as well, but some of them are feeling frustrated and they're going, well, what's the use? Nothing changes anyways. And, you know, I think that it's important that we voice our concerns. And I can also say, you know, like with all the process with ISL and everything, yeah, the feedback was given, but nothing much changed in all that time. And we saw sort of the same thing with the ASP that, yeah, a lot of feedback was given, but not much changed. In fact, we lost a little bit with the retention pond. And I know that council faces a huge choice, you know, in balancing out the needs of the community, the needs of the residents that touch these developments, and the needs of the developer. But I don't know which way is the best in this area. We are looking at country residential, and we're trying to put in multi-use and huge developments. And what worries me the same is across the road at the old chicken farm site, that's designed for, you know, high density. Well, if this is medium density, what's high density? A 10-story apartment building, or what are we looking at? So there is some concerns there. What is the balance in promoting this development? And is there a rush tonight that this needs to be passed? I know the developer would like this to be rushed, but I don't know if we're ready to make that decision. While apartments may meet the needs of the developer, does it meet the needs of the community? If we're looking at that 30 acres or 30 people per hectare, this far exceeds that. What indicates the need for apartment buildings this size? Is there a housing or rental study that was done? What are the vacancy rates? There's one building in Coaldale that's 3 stories, and it's been behind mature trees ever since it was built. Why put high and medium density right beside country residential? These would not even be noticed in Calgary, Edmonton, or even Lethbridge, but in Coaldale, they'll be noticed. We ask council to make the choice that works for Coaldale and its residents, not just growth. I've not seen anything that points to the need of a 3-story, 42-unit apartment building, let alone 3 of them. The other thing, in the past few years, we've seen a lot of development in this area. We've seen the effects of cottonwood on our area. We've seen the effects of seasons. We've seen the effects of fieldstone. And now we got another one just to the north of us And the only thing that we've seen is increased traffic, even though our taxes go up. And one of the reasons our residents were given our taxes were going up so much was to account for improvements in the area. Well, the only improvements we've seen is filling some potholes and drawing a line down 30th Avenue for a walkway. You know, so I think that it's really important to take a step back and look at this and go, does this make the most sense for our community and for our area here in the South? Like I said, we're not against development. I'm all for the single family or even the multifamily with townhouses or things like that with 2 stories. But 3-story apartment buildings just don't make sense for me in this area. I want to thank you guys, and I know that some of you aren't running for council again, and we thank you for your service. Please let your decision here consider all the information and even the stuff that we don't have just yet. For those running for council, ballots are next Monday. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. Any questions through to our presenter? Councillor Holm?
Thank you, Worship. Back to Greg on this one. So if the developer himself has come out and said that they're willing to put the cash into these 3-story multifamily units, and I look at it, I live in very close proximity to there. I look at it and say, what a perfect place. At least it's across from a schoolyard to the north of them. So they're not affecting anybody, in a way, anybody to the north. If the developer feels that there's a need and is willing to put his cash in, do you feel that that's something that council should get involved in?
No, definitely not. But I think council should get involved in whether or not this is going to be an improvement to our community and our area, or will it be a detractor? And I think that, yeah, you definitely need diversity of needs. I work with low-income people all the time in my work, and I know that there's a need for that. But does it have to be a 3-story, 42-unit apartment building? I don't know. I think you could probably do the same with a 2-story, you know. But I think you have to look at the aesthetics and what is the message we want to send to our community and to people that want to move to our community. Diversity is great. And like I said, 3 stories is just getting a little too high.
Okay, thank you, Greg and Councillor Holm. Any further questions? Okay, then I believe that Lana Heidi Froze is logged into the meeting, and so were you just listening then, Heidi, and would the letter read out by Cam suffice, or would you like to make a verbal presentation?
No, I just was listening. Cam read my concerns, so thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, is there anybody on the call that wants to either speak for or against this bylaw at this time? Okay, I'm not seeing any indication. Council, do you have any more questions that you would like to raise either through administration or to any of the presenters? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Oh, Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I think just in reflection of Mr. Schmidt's questions, are there any timelines that the developers are looking at for development of this area?
Good evening, Your Worship and councillors. This is Gary. Can I speak to that?
Okay, just identify yourself if you would. We're all familiar with you, but just to make sure that you're familiarize yourself with the.
Sure. This is yeah, I'm Gary Renkema and the developer. So.
Okay, go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, so to answer that question, you know, obviously, you know, market dictates a fair bit of this type of thing, and you know, especially when you look at, you know, what we're talking about, a low-rise apartment building. Usually, you know, obviously, we're not going to be building 3 apartment buildings in the next 12 months. You know, obviously, the market has to dictate a lot of what those needs are in the community. So, you know, we'd take a look at that and go, you know, when is the market ready for that? Obviously, vacancy rates are very low at this point. So, you know, maybe there is a need for, you know, a building in the next, you know, 3 years. So that's how we would look at that type of thing. And same with any type of townhomes or, you know, residential lots. It's all dictated by the market demand. So those types of things, you know, we take in stride and as the market allows. Thanks for your question.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there any other? So seeing no more interest from Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Worship. And this is more of a comment than a question. So I think we as council need to look at this development as not what it's going to look like today. It's in 20, 30 years when the development gets sold, how it's going to be maintained. Because, you know, when something is new, it always looks good, but as things get sold off and the maintenance and the area starts to look a little bit worse than when it was first developed. So I think we really need to consider how we allow that infill development, if it's going to be single family dwelling, multi-family dwelling, 2-story, 3-story, 10-story apartments, because it's not today. We've got to look for the future as well.
Okay, thank you. So I'll ask council one last time if there's any more clarifying questions. All right. Does council feel they have enough information to move forward and close the public hearing? Okay. All right. Well, I thank everybody for participating in tonight's public hearing on this matter. And given that there's no more speakers on the proponent side or the opposition side, I'll declare the public hearing closed. And we'll review this later on in the agenda. And we do have another public hearing that's scheduled for 5:30, which we're a little bit over time. And I apologize for that. So it's a public hearing on area structure plan for Prairie Crossing 828-P-09-21. And so then we are at Mayor Kim Craig. I'm going to open this public hearing at 5:55 p.m. and all questions and comments will be directed through me as the chair. Council is here to listen to the information presented and make a decision on the matter that is subject of this hearing. This is a formal hearing and is not a debate. Everyone wishing to speak who has pre-registered will be given an opportunity to speak once the matter as called upon myself as chair. Each presenter must state his or her full name, address, and their interest in the matter, including whether they are in support or non-support. Individuals who do not identify themselves will not be given the opportunity to speak. Presenters are to stay within a suggested 5-minute time limit on the presentation and are encouraged when speaking to keep the presentation to the point and refrain from restating points raised by previous presenters if possible. If new presentation materials are provided, you may be required to email a copy to the legislative coordinator. So I will now call upon staff to introduce the subject of this hearing, and Spencer Croyle is here, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a brief presentation to support the staff commentary this evening, so I'll just bring it up and share screen. All right, and just quickly, is council able to see the presentation slides, or is it my view that you're seeing?
Yeah, we can see the presentation slide, I think.
Okay. Now, is it
Sorry,
the presenter view?
we can see that. We can also see the next slide in your notes. There we
go. Okay.
go.
How about now?
Good.
There.
Okay, thank you. So as you've mentioned, Mayor Craig, this is a public hearing for Bylaw 828P-09-21 for the proposed area structure plan by the name of Prairie Crossing. Briefly, I'll give a outline of the presentation this evening, from purpose of the area structure plan all the way through a detailed description of what it entails through to the summary. So this is similar to how I presented at the July hearing for the South Coaldale revised area structure plan, but we don't deal with many area structure plans, so it's always helpful to just touch briefly on the purpose and intent of these types of documents. Of course, the MGA tells us we need to understand the sequence of development in a proposed area structure plan, proposed land uses, population densities, and other matters as considered necessary. So basically the same is reiterated in our town plan, with the focus being on making sure we have a comprehensive understanding of what our new neighborhoods look like as they get planned out and as they start to get developed as well. So to get from an area structure plan approval to future steps in the process, we go from today effectively, if council wishes to approve the ASP, through to detailed servicing plans, rezoning, subdivision, and development. Now, I just want to highlight again that more detailed site design and infrastructure information is available further on in the process. So the area structure plan could be described as broad brushstrokes. And once initial approval is ideally received by a proponent of an area structure plan, we get more detail and more funds and time invested into what the details of that neighborhood will be from a serviceability and a servicing perspective. And then eventually we get on through to rezoning, subdivision, and development permit stage, where we actually start to see the neighborhoods start to take shape. And with each of those stages, there's opportunity for feedback and dialogue with surrounding property owners. So for this particular item, this particular area structure plan this evening, it's east of the Parkside Acres neighborhood, on the far east end of the community. It was recently annexed in 2018, and it's adjacent to the eastern boundary of the Parkside Acres neighborhood. It's about 33 acres in size. And we can see, based on the visual on the screen here, where exactly the property in question this evening is located. So just briefly before we move on, it is worth noting that the town of Coaldale and County of Lethbridge intermunicipal development plan does apply. And it's also a part of the newly annexed area of the town, a part of the over 1,000 acres that was annexed in 2018. In terms of surrounding development, of course, to the west, we have Parkside Acres as the existing neighborhood there. We have highway commercial to the west as well, and the RCMP detachment to the west off of 19A Avenue and 8th Street as well. To the northeast and southeast, we have a combination of farmland and homesteads, productive agricultural land, and acreages make up those areas. And then to the south and southwest, we have the newly revitalized campground and the town's new mountain bike park as well. And then if we get further west from there, we have the dog park as well. In terms of current zonings, much of the area, including the subject property itself, is still urban reserve. Of course, all of the developed and subdivided properties in Parkside are a combination of R1B, R1C. There's some R2 and R2L in there as well. There's going to be highway commercial to the west, and then institutional recreational south, with the campground and the mountain bike park area. Within the county, the zonings outside of the town boundaries are all rural urban fringe. In terms of transportation, the area is primarily served by 20th Avenue on the south, secondarily by 8th Street, 19A Avenue on the north, and then Parkside Way as we get internal to the subject property itself. Their area is served by piped water, sewer, sanitary. There's also electrical and gas connections, communications connections available. Coaldale District EMS provide those services to the area, and the RCMP provides service as well. So in terms of stakeholder engagement, it's a required and expected part of any area structure plan development, whether it's a new area structure plan or an amendment to an area structure plan. To align with the expectations of the plan, the town's public participation policy, the most recent area structure plan amendments, and in this case, a new ASP, have undertaken a fair amount of engagement. And in this particular case, this engagement program has been facilitated and developed by ISL Engineering. So there was a combination of virtual and in-person open houses and a survey as well. And ISL will be providing a summary of the findings from that work later on in the presentation this evening. So just for the sake of clarity, all of the area in yellow is the areas that were circulated by mail. The public hearing this evening and information for the engagement when it was going on over the summertime as well. Now, in terms of the proposal itself, as council is likely already aware, it's a combination of commercial, residential, park space with a functional stormwater component and country residential areas. If we jump right into phasing, the proponent has suggested that phase 1 would be the 7 country residential lots on the south end of the development area, right off of 20th Avenue. And where it says phase 1 is an existing homestead. So the other lots would be created for the purposes of development occurring, but where the wording is for phase 1, there's an existing homestead already developed there. Phase 2 would be the commercial development on the far north end of the plan area. So the 2 lots that would potentially be able to be further subdivided if a commercial developer so wished. And then phase 3 would be the urban residential development that would take place within the proposed plan. In terms of land use and what the actual acreages or number of hectares per area work out to be for country residential, we have about 4 acres, give or take, that would be set aside for country residential development, about 5 hectares or 12.5 acres for the urban residential development in the yellow. And then commercial would be about 5.5 acres, with the municipal reserve and park space making up about 3.5 acres. So when we look at each of those areas in terms of what they represent, for the style of units that are expected to be there, because the area structure plan does indicate the exact size of lots and the types of multi-unit development you may see in this type of area are to be based on market demand rather than trying to estimate what they are now and then in the future having to shift backwards or forwards based on whatever the market does demand at that point in time. So for the country residential areas, we're looking at lots between 0.5 and 2 acres in size. For residential, we're looking at lots, generally it's easier to speak about frontage feet. So a 15-meter wide frontage would be 50 feet, generally in keeping with Westgate style of development. And then 7.92 meters isn't a width that we can use for single detached residential. That would be indicative of something like the minimum width we would expect for a townhome unit, for instance. With the commercial, we're looking at lots of about just shy of 3 acres apiece. And as I've already mentioned, those could be further subdivided if a commercial investor so wished. And the park space is about 3.5 acres. And then the pond itself takes up another 2.5 acres. In terms of projected population, we base these numbers on a range of between 2.5 to 3 people per dwelling because the current town average is about 2.7, but that can go up or down depending on the type of unit or the point in time that the community's at. So for the country residential area, that would be 18-ish people, give or take. For the residential areas, that would be between 235 and 370 people. So overall, you're looking at between roughly 250 to 400 people within the 33 acres to be developed here. And with particular focus on the residential component, there's a idea that it would represent between 90 and 142 lots, again, based on what specific market demand would be at the time that subdivision were to come forward as a part of the process in the future. In terms of open space, as I've discussed already, we have the municipal reserve park space and the pond itself. The actual functional part of that space that could be used for amenity, for walking and cycling and those types of things would be about 3.3 acres. And stormwater management is combined with that park space, as is typically the case with development these days. In terms of transportation, roads are proposed as shown at about 16.5 to 18.5 meters in width. That is minimum standard for City of Lethbridge local road network roads, and that's what the town bases our minimum road widths on. It's worth mentioning that prior to this evening, in a previous version of the plan, there was discussion of a 16-meter right-of-way for road widths, and that was identified by staff as not meeting the minimum standards for the city, and therefore not meeting the minimum standards that we would use for development in Coaldale. For pathways and sidewalks, pathways in the park space would surround the pond itself and then connect to the proposed and existing sidewalk networks, giving access to this municipal reserve park space from other existing built-up park spaces in Parkside and elsewhere in the community. It would also provide access to the campground, or the mountain bike park and the dog park once future improvements are made there next spring. In terms of transportation from a broader perspective, as is the case with area structure plans, Alberta Transportation was circulated and provided an opportunity to comment on this plan. They indicated they have no concerns with the proposal and that they expect to see a copy of the stormwater management plan once it's been developed for the area structure plan area. They also indicated a traffic impact assessment would be required after the development of the country residential lots, before the development of the residential areas or the commercial areas to the north. In terms of water service, the map shows that there is existing water service to the east edge of Parkside. There's an existing 200 millimeter water main along Parkside Way that would be tied into. Similarly, sewer is proposed to extend from the existing 200 millimeter main in Parkside Way as well. For commercial development, sewer could be connected to a future extension along 19A if that were to occur before development in the area that was defined as phase 3, which is the residential component. And also it's worth noting that the country residential areas, or the country residential lots to the south, would be serviced by way of a sanitary main running down the laneway behind those lots. The area structure plan currently indicates that sanitary would be extended along 20th Avenue, but that would be amended in the text should council find merit in the plan as it's been presented this evening. Pardon me. In terms of stormwater and stormwater service, the proposal would be to have the 2.5 acre pond that's proposed to capture the stormwater runoff in the neighborhood by way of future connection from the storm pipe that would be required to be installed in the neighborhood as well. In terms of alignment with the town plan, as Cam's already mentioned earlier this evening, the town plan was adopted in October of 2020. And for this proposal, the relevant parts of the town plan include going from broad to specific, the general land use strategy on pages 21 and 22 of that plan. The proposal, or the area that's under proposal this evening, is within the areas for growth in the town plan. And I've just highlighted in a red oval where exactly the 33 acres is that we're looking at this evening. So looking at the general framework for growth and change in the community, I've put check marks beside each of the components that this area structure plan either clearly meets or is expected to meet as future development stages or processes take place. So one of those would be maximizing the use of existing land in the areas for change. And if we can't do that because of the various complexities that are in place with areas for change or infill areas, as they're often referred to, areas for growth would need to be well planned in a comprehensive manner to make them available for development before they can be developed. There's also a focus on continuing to grow Coaldale's industrial, and in this particular case, commercial sector, to ensure continued diversification of our tax base, expanding housing opportunities, including active transportation infrastructure in our new developments by way of things like pathways and sufficient sidewalk networks, and then providing or requiring the provision of comprehensive plans for areas of growth in the community. So if we look at residential development goals, each of the goals here can be said to have been met by the proposed area structure plan in a general sense. So supporting a diversity of housing forms, encouraging housing options that cater to people of diverse abilities. That's reflected in the idea that this plan is to be driven by market demand as much as trying to predetermine what that looks like ahead of time. ensuring residential development makes efficient use of infrastructure, and supporting safe and attractive residential development compatible with the existing area. So in terms of multi-unit dwellings, we're not exactly sure what that looks like for this neighborhood yet, because the residential component of the plan isn't as specific as to say X amount of that area will be multifamily, X amount will be single detached, but rather it says if there is multifamily, it would be within the context of the site that's being developed. So if that is to be the case, it would be expected that there's going to be sufficient connections to green space and open spaces, as would be the case with any other plan proposing multifamily development as well. In terms of balanced residential densities, with the goal being in the town plan itself, striving for 8 units per acre, we're looking again at the idea of the flexibility of this area structure plan and saying that it could be between 90 and 142 units in that residential area, which would help with getting closer to that goal that the town plan has identified. In terms of design and placemaking, we talk about a variety of lot sizes and housing types, making sure there are sufficient parks and trails and active transportation systems, the use of a grid or fused grid layout to avoid a lack of sufficient connections to and from and within neighborhoods, and design features that promote walkability for new neighborhoods as well. In terms of highway commercial development, there is an opportunity here to ensure highway commercial development that does take place in the future meets the intent of the town plan, but not knowing what that development is going to be yet, we don't know exactly how that's going to meet the town plan. Once that development is proposed and there's an investor willing to make that development work, then it would be expected that whatever development does take place from a commercial perspective does meet the intent of the town plan. So again, in terms of communication, the applicant enlisted ISL Engineering to undertake the dialogue with the surrounding community, and representatives from ISL will be providing a more thorough summary of what those findings were. Generally speaking, the attendance and participation rates at those opportunities that ISL provided was fairly low. Feedback did include concern for various transportation-related matters, increased traffic and parking, things of that nature, land development in general, and the potential impact on wildlife that might make use of that 33 acres of urban reserve at this point in time. Notice of the public hearing was advertised for 2 weeks in the Sunny South on September 28th and October 5th, and the Let's Connect page was live on September 23rd. Notice of the hearing was also mailed to all area residents on September 24th. There was one written submission received last week, and I believe that was included in Council's package for this evening. It was a county resident who had indicated concern that they weren't of the understanding that this area was going to be developed in the future. So I did respond to that individual, or that property owner, letting them know that as a result of a substantial amount of research and engagement relating to the annexation, the intent from 2018 has always been to develop this area for future town growth. And with that, they did not take me up on my offer to participate in this evening's hearing, and rather just thank me for the information, and I have not heard from them since. Lethbridge County also needed to be circulated for this area structure plan. They did have a few initial concerns regarding future connections to the east, and lack of some commentary about how the plan meets the intent of the intermunicipal development plan. So the area structure plan that's a part of Council's package this evening was actually updated from first reading to this evening to reflect the changes made to honor the concerns of Lethbridge County. Most notably, in the initial version of the plan, there is a dead-end road, a future connection along Prairie Crossing Circle to potential future development to the east. The county indicated that, and rightfully so, with there being no future consideration for development east of the town boundary, with any updated intermunicipal development plan, it may have been premature to require that connection. So in this evening's version of the plan, that connection has been removed. And with dialogue with the county, understanding where they wanted to see additional verbiage around meeting the intent of the intermunicipal development plan, they've now indicated they have no concerns with the area structure plan as it's currently proposed this evening. So subsequent to consideration for any submissions made, Council may wish to consider passing Bylaw 828 for second and third reading as amended, to table further consideration of the bylaw, or to defeat the bylaw. That concludes concludes my comments. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions council may have prior to moving on to the proponents who may wish to speak as well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Spencer. If we can go to the gallery view then, and I can see if any members of council have any questions. Councillor Avery has a question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I've got a couple questions for Spencer. Didn't we have a section of that set out for industrial or manufacturing that we have done in the last couple of years? So how will that affect that if we pass second and third reading of this bylaw? Do we have to rescind any bylaw?
Through the mayor to Councillor Avery, thank you very much for that excellent question. And it's a reminder that I should have covered that in my presentation. The short answer is that the 2.5 acres in the far northeast of the proposed development area has been set aside for short-term RTM manufacturing and sales. Now, with that direct control bylaw that was put in place that's currently in the land use bylaw, the trigger for that, that property to be used for future commercial development would be when either when development gets close enough to that 2.5 acres that it no longer becomes compatible to have that RTM manufacturing facility near a residential and commercial neighborhood, or when that use that's going on within that direct control area becomes problematic from a noise and nuisance perspective. So there are mechanisms built in that don't require any additional consideration of that manufacturing area this evening, but they're taken care of by way of the bylaw indicating there is a trigger for that use to go away at some point in the future.
Okay, thank you. Second question, in the one slide where you said was phase one, where there's an existing residential building, wouldn't it make more sense if we subdivided that now and then at the MPC stage give the approval to keep that? Because in the future, if that old home, they decide to tear it down, then it's going to have to come back again and get this rezoned.
Through the mayor to Councillor Avery, I think if I understand correctly, you're talking about the homestead that's a part of the country residential proposal area. Okay, so for that particular item, the zoning, which would be the next step, would be the same for that homestead as it would for the other country residential lots that are proposed. It would either be CR1 or CR2. So it wouldn't be the case that we'd have to come back and consider rezoning again prior to any future development occurring there, if it was all to be zoned the same from day one.
Okay, because I was just concerned because that lot is 3 times the size of the other 7 that are in there. So I'm assuming in future development, they're going to want 3 more lots in there, but that's fine. My next question, is it normal to use another subdivision as your roadway to get in and not put your own roadway access in off of 20th?
Certainly, through the chair to Councillor Eby, that's another great question. The discussions that occurred prior to the plan being developed included a brief discussion with the developer of Parkside, who indicated they didn't have concerns with using that access for the main access to the new community. However, if council so wished, it could be altered such that 20th Avenue is built out to the east, and then that would require additional adjusting of the plan to make that work, to bring access into the neighborhood north of the country residential areas. Because there's no future development slated in any intermunicipal development plan or future growth plans for the town east of where 20th ends right now, it begs the question as to whether that would be premature or if it would be something that council would like to see ahead of future development plans being identified east of town.
Okay, thank you. That's it for questions, Your Worship.
Okay, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and through to Spencer, if I may. I want to thank you and also the developers for maintaining that confidence in with our collaboration and relationship with the county with respect to the IDP. I think that's a really meaningful adjustment that you've made there, and so My only question is with respect to the traffic impact assessment, the TIA, that would only be triggered once the commercial areas start developing. Is that what I'm hearing?
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, the triggers that Alberta Transportation has indicated would be either the residential component or the commercial component. So the only thing that they're willing to allow before a TIA being done is the country residential lots on the very south end of the plan area.
Once the 90 to 142 lots start developing, then it triggers the TIA then as well?
And specifically in the case of Alberta Transportation, they often require that to be completed or at least well underway, and them in agreement with how that TA is coming together prior to subdivision being finalized.
Okay, thank you.
Any other members of council with questions? Councillor Lloyd?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through Spencer. So the proposed density for this subdivision is 8, did you say?
Through the chair to Councillor Lloyd, I didn't identify a specific density because there's the range of 90 to 142 lots. Right. So it's not an exact number, but just a opportunity to say that with this area looking at a variety of densities, it would get us closer to that 8 units per acre that the town plan set out as a goal.
And what is the density of Parkside right now? Is it 7 or 6? 6, right?
I'm working off of memory, but I believe Parkside is closer to 10 if we include the multifamily on the northwest corner in the overall density of the area. Okay,
so we're compare this with the south development that we just talked about. You're looking at 8 there as well, and they've got 3 apartment blocks with 40 people in there. How are they going to put that into this development to make it to go to 8?
If I may, Mr. Chair, just as another point of clarification, I think what Cam was speaking to for the South Coaldale area wasn't that that area was representative of 8 units per acre, but more that everything that we're doing to increase density, whether it's slightly or significantly, is getting us closer to an average of 8 across the whole town rather than neighborhood by neighborhood.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other members of council? Okay, is there any other written presentations that have to be read into record, Spencer, or that's already done?
I believe the only other presentations this evening would be from the proponent's consultants, sorry.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, I would call upon Sue if she's the lead speaker again. Okay, go ahead, Sue.
I'd like to share my screen here, if I may.
Yeah, Lana will probably. Yeah.
Okay, did that work?
I can, yeah, we can see, you might want to change the view of the.
View, right. Oh. View. Sorry.
That's fine.
No. Where? Oh, I just saw this. Sorry. There we go. Okay.
There.
Are you able to see that now?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Sorry about that. I'm going to go through this again very quickly. I think I'm going to, I don't want to be repeating what Spencer has done, and he's already given a very thorough summary of the application. So going through, as Spencer talked about the requirement for an area structure plan and the different components of that are required to be in the plan. This is also an outline plan so that it gives a little more detail on showing block layouts, roadway networks, and storm catchment areas. So this is basically a combined area structure plan and outline plan for the 33 acres. This slide just gives us an idea of the process that we've gone through from the draft outline plan and ASP that we started with. We went through an engagement process. We sent the application into the town. It's gone through a review process, and now we're here at the public hearing. The land uses, again, Spencer's gone through this, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. The three different components, and the phasing being, first of all, the country residential, and then it's anticipated it will be the highway commercial. Oh, this actually, there's a typo on here. It should be the highway commercial, and then the residential would be the final component. The open space, again, shows the 10% reserve dedication plus the storm pond, and showing pathways and connections to the areas outside of this parcel. I have Curtis Hobbs is here with us. He is our engineer on the project. I think that probably he can answer any questions on this, but Spencer's already gone through and talked about all the servicing. So in light of that, my apologies to Curtis, I'm going to skip through these slides, and then, but please know he's here. If you have any questions on it, he'll be able to talk further. So water, sanitary, and storm. Public engagement. There was the online survey that ran from August 16th to 29th, and we had a live open house on August 24th. This is a summary of the What We Heard report, which I believe you have, and basically the things that people liked in here. They liked the green spaces and the parks and how they had been incorporated into the plan. They liked the location of the storm pond. They liked using the commercial areas along the north end as a separation from the highway. They liked using green spaces to provide separation from the different densities of housing, being the higher density in yellow and the country residential along 20th Avenue. And they liked using country residential as a transition to the country residential development that exists on the south side of 20th Avenue. The concerns that we heard were basically talking about narrow roads and alleyways, a lack of off-street parking, limited sidewalks, and congestion in the area. And this is a summary of how we responded. The local roads we changed. We had proposed initially a narrower road. We've changed those so that they will comply with the road standards currently used, which would range from 16.5 to 18.5 meters. And that'll be determined at the time of subdivision when when the TIA is done and we understand what the traffic generated in this area will be. Some of the areas, like the areas central to the yellow residential, have lanes, which provides an opportunity for rear garages that would help with parking that would provide for off-street parking, or front drive garages in the areas that don't have lanes. It's proposed that there will be sidewalks on both sides of the street to accommodate pedestrian traffic. And one of the things, and it came up earlier in the discussion, was the entryway off of Parkside Green. The area on the road stub on the Parkside Green side already exists, and we've been connecting to that. And the road layout throughout the Prairie Crossing plan, it provides a traffic calming in the design itself, in that it isn't a road that's going to start at 19A Avenue and go directly south to 20th. That would be a way that people could shortcut through the community. In order to go from 19A Avenue to 20th, it's a deliberate decision to do that, because you have to make a number of turns going through here, and it won't be like a freeway that just has traffic running through it. But those were some of the changes that we made in there to look at some of the concerns that people had about additional traffic and parking in the community. And I think that just brings us to questions now. As I say, Curtis Hobbs is here if you have anything related to the more technical aspects. or anything that I can add, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sue. Is there any questions of council? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and through to Sue, if I may. Parkside Way, I just noticed that now if you go straight north from there and then it stops there and then it turns left. Can you give us a picture of what we're looking at there?
Actually, I wasn't involved in the development on the west in Parkside, and that may be something that Spencer can answer, but I'm not sure what the intent was for the northern part of that parcel.
Thank you, Sue. Mr. Chair, if I may jump in for a moment.
Please.
Thank you. So to Councillor Chapman, excellent question. That's actually a utility right of way, or there's a storm pipe buried there, for lack of a more clever way of describing that, but it's not a road right of way. So that it looks like it's a road right of way that just takes a hard left after continuing through Parkside Way. That is not how that road is going to be developed. And in fact, the developer of Parkside has verbally indicated that they'd be willing to consider a connection to 19A as that community continues to build out to the north. So please disregard the L that's sitting on its side there. That's not related to the road network.
Okay, and any other council members? I don't have a full view of people, so I got almost everybody except for Councillor Paul. So if anybody wants to ask any questions, please indicate or shout out. I don't see Councillor Simpson either on the view I have, so.
We can see Councillor Simpson and Councillor Butch on my sheet, on my screen here.
So I'm not hearing any verbal requests to ask any questions. Oh, okay. So I'll thank Sue for that. And then are there any people in the queue that are registered to speak for or against this application, Lana?
Mayor, no, there was just supporting engineers to speak to the matter. There was no residents.
Okay, thank you. And any other comments have already been read into the record. So is there any final questions of any members of council? Okay. I'm missing Councillor Holm and Councillor Simpson and Councillor Pauls on my view, so I'll give one last chance for anybody to verbally shout out if they have any questions. And hearing none, I will close the public hearing and thank everybody for their participation.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we have public hearing item number 6.3, Land Use Amendment, Landscape Guidelines 827-P-09-21. And that's a public hearing on that. I'll declare that public hearing open. And my name is Tim Craig. I'll chair this public hearing with all questions and comments being directed through me. Council is here to listen to information presented and make a decision on the matter that is subject to this hearing. This is a formal hearing and there's not a debate. Anybody wishing to speak who has pre-registered will be given an opportunity to speak once to the matter as called upon by myself. As chair, each presenter must state his or her full name, address, and their interest in this matter, including whether they are in support or non-support. Individuals who do not identify themselves will not be given an opportunity to speak. Presenters are to stay within a suggested 5-minute time limit on the presentation and are encouraged when speaking to keep the presentation to the point and refrain from the restating points raised by previous speakers if at all possible. If new presentation materials are provided, you may be required to email a copy to the legislative coordinator. I will now call upon Mr. Coyle to introduce this matter. Go ahead,
Thank
Spencer.
you again, Mayor. So for this evening, I also have a quick presentation for this item as well. As you already mentioned, this is a public hearing for Bylaw 827-P-09-21, amendments to the land use bylaw. So where these amendments or proposed amendments are coming from is the culmination of work that's taken place since March of this year, and in a less formal sense well before that, with discussions with developers and keeping track of the measurable components of what landscaping requirements look like for industrial development in Coaldale. The purpose of the amendments is, it says twofold, but it should say threefold. First, to provide clarity, consistency, and ease of process for developers, where currently there is quite a wide swath between understanding things in an exact sense and how they can be interpreted in a less clear way. We're hoping to bridge that gap and create a lot more clarity and consistency for developers. The second point that this addresses is recognition that industrial and commercial are different forms of development. So for instance, when we look at some of our highway commercial development or our local commercial development, Land O'Lakes Dental or Tim Hortons or McDonald's, they all have a different need for different styles of landscaping than you would find in the industrial area. And that's by virtue of the fact that they're fundamentally different types of uses. And the third is that we're realizing, or we hope to be able to realize, workflow efficiencies for staff in spending less time interpreting the guidance for developers when they're expected to implement industrial landscaping, and more time helping them along and maintaining their timelines and their desired schedules while still upholding the desires for the town to have a visually appealing and consistently developed industrial area. So in terms of the current rules that we're going to be focusing on for the most part this evening, we have 10% of lots, the lot or site area is to be landscaped. We also require 1 tree per 65 square meters of landscaped area in the industrial setting. We also require a 20-foot or 6.1 meter landscape buffer measured from the front of the lot back to be put in place for all of the lot frontages in the industrial areas. We also require professional involvement from a landscape architect or designer to prepare these industrial developments or the landscape for the industrial developments. We also require security equal to 50% of the estimated construction value for new landscaping to be put in with new developments. And that can be a fair amount of money when we consider the area of landscaping that's required for some of our larger developments. So since 2013, there's been some success with the landscaping requirements we currently have in place, but there are some areas that could certainly be improved. So we believe at the staff level that there are a number of wins that could be realized in terms of reducing what is referred to most commonly now as red tape and unnecessary or cumbersome rules and requirements for developers in the industrial setting in the community. Key proposed changes include removing the 10% of lot or site area to be landscaped. That's more arbitrary and less purposeful in the sense that frontages are really what the focus is. So the frontage of any lot that fronts onto a public right-of-way or public roadway should have landscaping as a major part of the frontage of that industrial development. Oftentimes with the 10% lot requirement for larger lots, there's a need for developers to be landscaping or providing some kind of tree or foliage component in the rear of their lots or behind their buildings, which doesn't necessarily achieve the goal of visually appealing development, because visually appealing is generally realized and experienced from the roadway and not from the backs of lots. Of course, that's up for interpretation, but that's the interpretation that staff has given to that part of the discussion. There's also been a request made several times over the past number of years to have the minimum number of trees offset by allowing X number of shrubs, hard word for me this evening, X number of shrubs to replace a certain number of trees. So another proposal that we've prepared is to a maximum of 20% of all trees required for a particular development site, allow 5 shrubs per 1 tree to replace up to 20% of the trees required, to allow for flexibility in that regard. We've also realized that the 20-foot or 6.1 meter strip of frontage landscaping has often been questioned as to whether that's from the back of the curb, because developers are required to landscape and maintain the boulevard areas as well as that 20 feet of frontage within their own property. So it usually ends up being closer to 30 feet that they're developing for landscaping. And through discussions with developer staff has realized that can be seen as over requirement or additional requirement beyond what the 20 feet is really meant to achieve, which is a consistent frontage of landscaping for the industrial area. There's also some frustration with the idea of professional involvement. That would still be required, but it wouldn't have to be for a landscape architect or designer. It could be done by a project engineer, and we'll get into why that's, we believe that's a reasonable approach a little bit later on. There's also a proposal to set landscaping deposits or security for landscaping that's completed at $5,000 per acre. So it's not $1,000, which was largely being ignored. And then there was no landscaping being put in place because for $1,000, developers could save several thousand by not doing landscaping. But it's also not 50% of the cost of the landscaping, which tends to be a much higher number than $5,000 per acre that's proposed this evening. So just very quickly, we'll go through each of those changes and why we think they're valuable changes that will help reduce barriers to getting good landscaping and continuing the excellent pace of industrial development in the community that we've seen recently. So we would require frontage to be landscaped in a consistent manner from the back of curb for 20 feet. So that's including the boulevard and then whatever number of feet into the front property that would be. But ultimately it would be a 20 feet from back of curb. And that's the frontage area that would be expected to be landscaped. So again, 10% of water site coverage is open to interpretation. With that 20-foot frontage being proposed from back of curb, that realizes a visual consistency without putting a relatively arbitrary 10% burden on the developers. With the idea of trees being able to be replaced at a ratio of 5:1 with shrubbery to a maximum of 20% of trees, there's no flexibility in the bylaw currently. So if a developer wished to replace some trees with shrubs, they would have to go to the planning commission to do so. And realizing that there are some newer developments that are coming down the pipe that do require better view sheds along the corner of properties, or even for some solar components to solar panels that are either ground mounted or mounted on the roof of buildings, there's a hesitancy to want to provide trees to the maximum number of trees that's provided, because once they grow to a certain height, they can actually impede the function of some parts of the lot. So this would also help the lots to be more functional over time. In terms of landscape frontage, I think I've already touched on this, but it's again, inconsistent interpretation of the rules, and the back of curb to 20 feet back, whatever distance that takes us into the lot would still create visual consistency as long as it's applied consistently. And it's much more clear to say it's 20 feet from the back of curb instead of it's 20 feet from the property line, and then you also have to develop the boulevard as well. Professional involvement would still be required, but taking away the component that we have to have landscape architects or designers be a part of the process. We've, over the past several months, been developing a landscaping guideline that Melanie Messier with Planning and Development has spent a lot of time working with local landscape designers and landscape companies to come up with the appropriate types of trees and shrubs and foliage and ground cover and all of those components that make up good landscaping in our climate. That in and of itself can help a designer be able to put not too much work into how they'd like for landscaping to be designed, and still come up with a product that's visually pleasing and suitable for our climate. So the reason we'd still require professional involvement is because all new developments require professional involvement in the context of an engineer having to do civil design and construction drawings. And so we've found success recently over the past year or two with project engineers providing landscaping designs as well. This is helpful because it's no additional burden to the developer. The project engineer can put these together fairly quickly, and they also understand where certain trees and shrubs shouldn't be or should be placed to avoid conflicts with buried utilities, which is helpful as well. The landscaping security fee to be set at $5,000 an acre was something that was looked at to avoid having to create too much back and forth between developers, landscaping professionals, and town staff. Often it would be the case where we're looking at cost estimates, questioning certain quantities or values, having to go back to the developer or the landscaping professional, adjust those numbers, figure out what 50% is, and then figure out if we'd like to take that by way of cash or check or security. So by simply indicating $5,000 per acre, That's roughly half, based on some back of napkin calculations, that's roughly half of what it would be if it was 50% of the actual value of landscaping that we've seen in the recent past. So it's more than 1,000, which wasn't enough of an incentive to require landscaping to actually be done, but it's not so much that it's creating a financial burden for developers and investors. Other proposed changes that are secondary to, but still important to mention, secondary to the key changes that I've just mentioned, would include requiring all frontage other than main accesses to lots to be landscaped, not allowing loading stalls or spaces right off of public right-of-way, and requiring irrigation for all landscaping. So again, very briefly, why would we require all lot frontage other than accesses to be landscaped? Because previous developments have claimed that the entire frontage of a lot is used for parking and loading access. And that's functionally ineffective because it takes away on-street parking, which is important for commercial vehicles when they're pulling up. If they're extended length vehicles, they need space on street to be able to park and maneuver. We take that away if we allow the entire width of a lot to be access. It also creates a potential dangerous situation when we have commercial vehicles pulling into loading bays right off the front of a street and then backing back onto the street. So by requiring only main accesses to be allowed onto a roadway or off of a roadway, and then every other part of that frontage to be landscaped, we're managing access to those sites and creating safer situations for vehicles to enter and exit the sites effectively. So I believe I've already covered this portion of that as well, avoiding cross traffic with not allowing access across the whole frontage of sites. In terms of communication, the proposed amendments were posted in the Sunny South newspaper on September 28th and October 5th, and the Let's Connect Coaldale page went live on September 22nd. We received no written comments or requests to speak at the hearing this evening. And with that, Council is welcome to consider passing the bylaw for second and third reading with or without amendments, tabling the bylaw, or defeating the bylaw. That concludes my commentary, and I'm happy to answer any questions Council may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Spencer. There we go. Okay, I'll open the floor to questions of Council. Councillor Holm.
Thank you, Worship. More of a comment than a question towards this. I really like these amendments that you're proposing here. Having been on municipal planning commissions for a number of years now, this is certainly going to make it much simpler to make sure that the landscaping, something actually gets done, and not have this come back in front of municipal planning a number of times. I think it'll free up staff to make some of these decisions. So very supportive of what you've got here.
Thank you. Okay. Any other members, Council? All right, okay, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Spencer, in your not in your presentation, but in our agenda, you do have options for trees and that. So you have sort of a category of foliage and plants that you would be either requiring or recommending for these developments.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Chapman. First, I'd just like to thank Councillor Holm for his support and kind words. We also hope that it creates efficiencies and better outcomes for staff and developers. For Councillor Chapman's question, that's definitely the case. So again, with all credit going to Melanie and SEA, she's done a lot of work to work very closely with and create a lot of good dialogue with local landscape professionals and come up with basically a choose your own adventure menu of all of the variety of ground cover and foliage and grasses and different ways to approach how to landscape these lots that's in keeping with what they would recommend and what would be supported by the local climate as well.
Thank you, Spencer. Just looking backwards a bit, then any lots that have already been developed and landscaped and that they wouldn't be amended to this formula, then would they? They would just continue with their approvals already?
Through the chair to Councillor Chapman, that's correct. So if anything already has an approved development permit placed upon it, these wouldn't be retroactive unless that was the desire of council. It can become somewhat problematic because developers at that point likely would have already costed out everything this could change some of those projections. But for any lots that have been purchased where a development permit hasn't been applied for, these rules would apply.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions of council? Okay, last call. And as Spencer already indicated, there were no requests for any members of the public to speak to this bylaw, and no written submissions. So, and viewing that no member of council has any further questions, I will now close this public hearing then. And thank Spencer for his guidance through this part of the meeting. Okay, and then now we turn to item 7.1, Land Use Bylaw Amendment 825P-09-21. Cam, do you have anything to add to that?
No, not at this time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, council. Does any member of council wish to speak to this, or? Councilor Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just make a motion for second reading.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilor Simpson for second reading. Any discussion? Councilor Lloyd. Go ahead, Councilor Lloyd.
Just trying to find my mute button. Thank you, Your Worship. I'm a little bit hesitant to rush into this because of the concerns that have been brought forward. I think there's been some valid concerns, and I'm not sure that we've totally addressed all of them. Is there any reason why this has to go through today?
Right, then Councilor Avery.
Thank you, Worship. I agree with Councilor Lloyd, and once you call the vote on Councilor Simpson's, if it is defeated, I would like to make a motion to table this until we gather more information.
Okay, well, we have a motion on the floor for a second reading, so that precedes Councilor Avery's. So anybody care to speak? Councilor Holm.
Thank you, Your Worship. Speaking in favor of the motion, I'm not sure what additional information it is that anybody is looking for in this. I believe that we've been briefed very well over the last two meetings on exactly what this development is going to entail. I know there was some questions about the multifamily units, etc., but I don't believe that that is really going to impact second and third reading of the bylaw the way it is. It can always be brought up and discussed further when the detailed plans come through in the next stage. So I feel that this needs to be moved forward so the developer can continue with their work.
Any further discussion? Councilor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I think with respect to the presentation, we weren't really clear in terms of whether it was 2-story, 3-story. I think that was kind of something we were wondering about. I see through the land use bylaw amendment that they would include a storm pond, as we had talked about earlier, so that would meet my satisfaction for approval. But I think there was some concerns about the definitions for for density, but also with respect to the whether the 3-story building would meet the satisfaction of the community.
Okay, Councillor Holm?
Again, speaking in favor of this, the bylaw that we have in front of us does not go into the details of whether it's 2-story, 3-story, or 10-story. All it's talking about is the density. And that's what we're approving with this bylaw. We're not approving what color shingles are being put on this. We're deciding whether we're going to have, what density we're going to allow, whether we're going to have R1 or R2 or multifamily. That's all we're approving here. So let's not get into the weeds of whether we're going to have red shingles or blue shingles or 2-story or 3-story or 10-story. That's not what we're approving here. So let's stay with what the approval's for.
Okay. Any further questions to Councillor Simpson's motion for second reading? Yeah, I see no more questions. So I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay. So we have myself, Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Holm, and Councillor Pauls in favor, and opposed. Councillor Chapman and Councillor Avery are opposed. That second hearing is carried. Councillor Holm, you...
I would move third reading.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's myself, Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Holm, and Councillor Pauls are voting in favor and opposed. Councillor Avery and Councillor Chapman are opposed. Thank you. I got a note from the legislative coordinator, but we will do 4.2. But let's get through the public hearing, the bylaws and policies, and then we can entertain that, I think. So now we're on to 7.2, and we have the area structure plan 828-P-09-21, Prairie Crossing area structure plan. And Spencer, do you have any further comments?
I do not. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, so then we have that before council. So any questions or Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Worship. I'll move for second reading.
Okay, we have a motion by Councillor Chapman to move second reading of that. Any discussion? I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's unanimous. I'll call out if there's anybody opposed, but I got a unanimous thing. I counted 7, so we have second reading approved. We can entertain third reading if you so wish. Councillor Lloyd moves for third reading of the bylaw. Call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Then we have item 7.3, land use bylaw amendment 827-P-09-21. And Spencer, do you have any more comments to that item?
No, again. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Okay, and I concur with Councillor Holmes' comments, and he wants to make a motion to solidify his strong endorsement, I think. So go ahead.
Reading.
Okay, Councillor Holmes moves second reading of that. I'll call for any questions. I don't see any. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's unanimous for my count.
Move third reading.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Holmes moves for third reading. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously as well. Thank you. Okay, and then we're at 7.4, and I think Kyle Beauchamp is, or no, Kaylin is going to speak on his behalf for those things. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be pinch hitting for our CFO as he had another engagement and the meeting went a little bit longer than we had anticipated. So I will be speaking on his behalf for these agenda items, which appeared before council at the regular council meeting of September 27th. So this one is the first of a series of 4, and this is the rates and fees bylaw. The track changes that were made from the previous time this appeared before council are indicated in the actual staff report. Fire and emergency services, the fire-related fees in green were changed based on the recommendations from Coaldale and District Emergency Services. These rate structures relate to a more accurate fee structure that is more common in practice than what we had previously. And it's also requested that council rescind bylaw 693-C-08-14, fire service fees. This bylaw is no longer relevant with the related fees now captured in the rates and fees bylaw. So the rates and fees bylaw, by having that in place, you'll see in the rest of the agenda items, this allows council to rescind or amend, the other bylaws where fees and rates are present. So that way, once a year as part of budget, you evaluate utility rates, you also look at your fees and rates bylaw. It's only one change to one bylaw, as opposed to updating several bylaws potentially each year. So this is another aim at a more efficient operation. So under financial impact, I believe our CFO has provided a good summary of the changes that are being recommended, and the actual changes themselves are in the attached bylaw tracked in red so that you can see the changes that are being contemplated. So at this time, we're bringing this before council for consideration of second and third reading. I'll turn it back over to council to see if there's any additional changes they'd like to make prior to considering second reading.
So Kevin, when you were talking about the fire bylaw, is that already reflected in the points in what we're looking, points 8 and 9, say to rescind those bylaws, or is that, I didn't quite catch the fire bylaw that you were numbered.
Yeah, good question. On page 224 of your agenda package on item 7.4 under fire and emergency services fees, there is a note that states that if the rates and fees bylaw is amended to include the issues relative to fire, that bylaw 69C-08-14, fire service fees, can be rescinded.
So do we need a specific motion to rescind that?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions of administration? Appears not. Does anybody care to move second reading then? Councillor Chapman, you're sponsoring second reading of the bylaw. Any discussion? Okay, I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Third reading. Councillor Simpson sponsors third reading. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's unanimous as well. And then a motion of council to rescind bylaw 693-C-08-14 fire services fees. Councillor Lloyd moves that. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, and then we're moving on to item 7.5, Community Services Standards Bylaw 830-R-09-21. Go ahead, CEO Hastings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the bylaw that appeared before council at the regular council meeting of September 27th for consideration of second and third reading. I have nothing further to add to what's already contained in the staff report and to what was already discussed last council meeting. But this is council's opportunity to make any amendments to the bylaw prior to considering approval of second and third reading.
Okay, thank you. Any questions through to administration? Councillor Simpson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move for second reading.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Councillor Simpson sponsoring second reading. Call the question. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. And we can entertain third reading. Councillor Lloyd moves third reading. Discussion. Call the question. All in favor? That's carried unanimously. 7.6. We have the Cannabis Consumption Bylaw 831-R-09-21. We can entertain second and third reading. And Kaylin, do you have any other thoughts or comments?
Nothing further to add, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Councillor Holm, you sponsor second reading?
No, I was going to have some questions on this one.
Okay, okay, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, going through it, I'm just wondering why we have, and I don't know, this is probably the cart in front of the horse. We should have maybe talked about it when we had the fee schedule, but I'm wondering why we have a cannabis consumption bylaw, but we don't have one for alcohol or tobacco. And then we have a fee for cannabis consumption bylaw. We don't have a fee for tobacco or alcohol. And I'm wondering why we would have one, because they've all got provincial and federal legislation as far as I'm aware. And I'm assuming that we default to provincial legislation for smoking in a public place or drinking alcohol in a public place. Why would we not default to the same thing with cannabis consumption and default to the provincial legislation on that? I'm confused, and I don't want to have confusing bylaws in here where a person can be sitting having a cigarette outside the sportsplex or drinking a beer outside the sportsplex and not get charged then by a bar law enforcement officer. But if they're smoking a marijuana cigarette, now we have a municipal bylaw. There's something wrong with this. It doesn't fit with me. I just need some clarification.
Excellent questions. I see that Cam Mills is still online here, and I know that he did a lot of the initial community engagement work, consultation with legal counsel, and a look at other communities and what they were doing and why. And if Cam is still there, I wouldn't mind just calling on him to provide a bit of context before I weigh in.
Yeah, fair. That's fair. Kaylin, now I haven't read this bylaw in a while, so I do apologize. But this was something that I was engaged in with the town. This would be about 3 years old or so, dating back to when cannabis was first made legalized. And as you may recall, we did just a massive amount of public engagement on this issue. Probably the issue that we've received the most or the highest volume of public engagement on. I believe we had a survey that was about 1,000 people or so that responded and what have you. And so the public engagement drove a lot of council's decision making on this particular issue. But as you may recall, the public engagement revealed a community that was very, very polarized on the particular issue. The fundamental split was about 40% sort of very much in favor of cannabis legalization and 40% extremely opposed, and then sort of 20% of people kind of in the middle. So it was very, very polarized on the extreme pro and con sides of the equation. And so as part of our efforts towards legalization, we had to make amendments to the land use bylaw to accommodate retail sales. And then we also had to consider whether or not to have regulations with respect to consumption. And so what council opted to do, we did create regulations with respect to retail sales that mirrored the AHS recommendations. So they definitely came on the more, what you might describe as the more sort of conservative side of the spectrum in terms of regulating the establishment of retail sales. And then we also established this cannabis consumption bylaw, which outlined how the town would regulate the consumption of cannabis. And so that involved a substantial amount of discussion at the council level and the public level prior to arriving at that. It's of course at any point something that could be brought up by council, and a decision could be made to change that. Certainly, perhaps there are lessons learned over the last 3 years that may be something that makes sense to consider. But until that's done, the bylaw we have in place is the regulation we have in town.
Okay, and then CAO Hastings.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In Councillor Holmes' questions, like this is your question is more related to the policy instrument of this bylaw, which is something, if this is going to require a full overhaul, that obviously won't be able to be completed this evening, and is something that the next council can tackle, because you do ask some big questions, but some good questions. Really, the purpose of bringing it here today was just to remove Schedule A, the fee section of this bylaw, not to look at the policy elements of it, the scope, the restriction. Like, those are all good questions, but we weren't preparing to discuss those questions with this council at this particular meeting. What could take place very easily next council is a complete relook at this bylaw. All we're simply trying to do today is be consistent with any bylaw that contains fees, and then bringing them all under one roof, that being the rates and fees bylaw. So the only purpose that we bring the cannabis bylaw before council today is just simply to remove the schedule that contains the fees, just like we're doing so with the animal control bylaw or the any other bylaw that we've looked at this evening. So that helps clarify the purpose for why we're here versus the options that are open to council going forward.
I saw Councillor Chapman's hand go up. You still have a question?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Kaylin, I would make the motion to remove the fee schedule from this bylaw, and subsequent to that, to have administration review this bylaw in concert with the Safe and Healthy Communities group that have been really quite concerned about some of these items, including tobacco and alcohol from that perspective too, both from mainly from a public perspective.
Okay, so any other questions or? Councillor CEO Hastings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in response to Councillor Chapman's comments, it'll be important to deal with whether council wishes to approve formal second reading, and from there third reading, and then secondary to that, it would be a separate standalone motion with respect to the comment about safe and healthy communities. So I'm just cautioning that council does need to consider second and third reading apart from potential referrals to other agencies for review, just so that the two ideas aren't blended into a single resolution.
Just for second and third reading, then the fee schedule is not going to affect so what you're saying is that the fee schedule will be today, and the review of that policy as a whole can be done later.
That's correct. And it would have to be a separate standalone motion, which you're welcome to make. I just cautioning that the two concepts don't get blended together in a single motion.
Does anybody care to sponsor a second reading of the bylaw? Councillor Avery, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and opposed? So we have Councillor Holman, Councillor Pauls opposed, myself, Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Chapman. Councillor Simpson and Councillor Avery are in favor. Third reading. Councillor Simpson sponsors third reading. Any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Okay, so that's myself, Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Avery in favor, and opposed. Councillor Holman, Councillor Pauls. Okay. Then we have the item 77, dog regulation and control bylaw 832-R-09-21. Councillor Avery.
I'll move second reading.
Discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Okay, and that's unanimous. Councillor Avery?
Third reading.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, I'll call the question, all in favor? That's unanimous. And then we have a 7.8 communications policy. Leah.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. So the purpose of the staff report is to present council with an amendment to the town's communication policy. The amendment is intended to create a formalized process for departments, special interest groups, project services, and or organizations that fall under the town's scope to make specialized social media accounts that fall under the town's domain. So this allows other groups to have a dedicated social media presence to push certain messaging without interfering with the town's main channels. So Access Coaldale, for instance, which is the town's accessibility working group social media page, is the first social media account to be piloted under this policy amendment, and it promotes messaging about the group's mission while building a following that is interested specifically in the topic of accessibility in Coaldale. There are also opportunities to open, in the future, to open up other accounts, for instance, a recreation-focused account similar to what the City of Edmonton or the City of Brooks have when we open up our new rec center and our capacity for recreation opportunity expands. So again, these are just ideas, but we can certainly explore other options moving forward. But this amendment, having this amendment in place just allows us that flexibility to create new accounts that promote specialized messaging while still adhering to our communications policy. So with that, I will open up the floor to council.
Hey, thank you, Leah. Any questions through to Leah? Councillor Chapman? You're on mute. Oh, there you go. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. And through to Leah and your group there, I want to just thank you so much for all your research and hard work on this this topic. I think that it's it'll fit what we're heading into. Just a few items here that I wanted to speak to, and I appreciate some of the points that you've made here with respect to mayor and councillors, and that the official spokesperson of council is the mayor. What I would like to ask you, and through to Kaylin as well, that this communications bylaw be, or policy, I should say, be introduced and be part of an orientation package for the new council, and so that everybody understands the responsibilities outlined in there. And so further to that, I wanted to just mention on page, there's a few few spelling errors that probably need to be fixed. So I can, on page 301, there's a few spelling, I think it's more just that there need to be if under you are authorized to comment, you must not, and then there's a constitute contempt of court. And then there's a few other ones. I could probably send those to you later if you'd like. And that's all I've got to say.
Okay, thank you. And CEO Hastings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And partial response to Councillor Chapman's question and comment. Communication and flow of communication, that is a part of council orientation. This deals with the official spokespersons of the town of Coaldale. The question of to what extent council wishes to agree upon itself how much individual councillors can speak and share information on their personal Facebook pages, like that is a separate discussion that the next council is going to have to discuss amongst themselves to decide what kind of informal agreement they want to make amongst themselves. But there's nothing in this policy that would preclude individual councillors from operating their own social media pages, but this does deal with like official corporate statements from the town. And it is common practice for this to be a centralized procedure. Otherwise, it can get really disorganized if you've got several different arms of the town saying slightly different or potentially conflicting pieces of information. It does get very difficult to manage and opens us up to some significant risk. So I hope that delineation between formal and informal communication makes sense as it relates to council.
Yeah, thank you, Kaylin. I'm reading through the policy. It was made very, very clear in terms of what individual responsibilities and options there are if you have your own personal social media pages, including Twitter or Instagram or Facebook and that. So I think it just really explains very clearly to us all what its purpose is. Well, that's really good. Well done.
Okay. And administratively, is it can we pass this policy and direct the administration to make any non-material edits or corrections that may be required for grammar and spelling? I don't think Councillor Chapman noted any grammatical changes that would materially change the context of the stated policy. So maybe, so that could be the direction of council, is to move the communications policy with proper grammatical and spelling errors to be made. Councillor White?
I'll just make the motion for that, please.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, I see none. All in favor? That's carried, and administration will comb through that and just make the necessary spelling errors, corrections and whatnot. And I apologize for overlooking item 4.2 earlier. So with your indulgence, we will go back up to earlier part of the agenda, and the municipal accountability program map response plan, and Kaylin Hastings would present on that matter. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As was foreshadowed at the regular council meeting of September 27th, follow-up report containing the action plan items for the areas of deficiency that were noted as part of the municipal accountability program process that was conducted. I'm going to go through the 10 areas that were highlighted, provide a brief explanation, as well as what the corresponding action plan includes. I will note that many of the items that were flagged have already been rectified. So on page, under closed meetings, which is page 42 of the Municipal Accountability Program report, it was noted that when council goes into closed session, as part of the resolution to go into closed session, council needs to also cite the statutory basis for going into closed session. So the template for the resolution here, this was a practice that we started working on soon after this item became flagged. So starting on July 12, 2021, you'll recall that there's been a change to how the motion to go into closed session has been structured, and it's to reflect this area of the audit that was conducted by Municipal Affairs. So that the sample template here basically is that council moved to go into closed session at insert the time in accordance with section 197.4 of the Municipal Government Act to discuss matters exempt from disclosure for agenda items, and then you list them, subject to FOIB sections, and then you list them. And that's the new way that resolutions are to be structured going into closed session. So there shouldn't be any big surprise there. Under section 3, under voting on page 48 of the MAP report, all councillors have to vote on a matter unless they were absent from a public hearing or they have a conflict of pecuniary interest. So that you'll note that the mayor is added to the council meeting procedure to ensure that each member of council votes on all matters put forward before council unless the councillor was absent from all or part of a public hearing or the councillor declares a conflict of pecuniary interest. So this is just a note to ensure that council, if they're here, has to vote. The one example where this got flagged is that there wasn't a motion, council didn't vote in favor of a motion to approve the minutes because they weren't at that meeting. Municipal Affairs advises that you still have to vote on the minutes even if you weren't at the actual meeting. So that was covered on page 48. And then on page 52, this deals with the mandatory bylaws. So this one, starting with the Code of Conduct, Municipal Affairs identified 2 areas within the existing bylaw that'll need to be amended in the future to ensure it complies with the Municipal Government Act. I have let legal counsel know, the same legal counsel that drafted the original bylaw. The point number 1 is that members will have to adhere to municipal policies, procedures, and bylaws. That needs to be included in the Code of Conduct bylaw. And point number 2, members will attend council orientation and other prescribed training sessions. I didn't bring forward an amending bylaw to council for this because I think it's important that the new council, as part of reviewing this bylaw, has the opportunity to make any changes that they wish to match the direction of governance that they'll be proceeding toward. It will be at that time, if council wants to make any other changes to the bylaw, that we can deal with these mandatory revisions that were caught by Municipal Affairs. So just to kind of explain the timing, because I didn't want to asked for an amendment today and then council review it a couple months from now and have further amendments. It seems more efficient to do them together. The property tax bylaw, the only area of note that was made by Municipal Affairs is that the requisition for family and community support services, otherwise known as FCSS, that needs to be rolled into the general municipal levy. The next update to the property tax bylaw will be done in May 2022, and we will ensure that this step is undertaken. We do have a year to complete all of these items, so we don't want to reopen up the property tax bylaw at this stage. We'll wait till the next time it appears back in May. Assessment review boards, page 55. A resolution appointing the clerk of the boards was not available, and this stems from a little bit of confusion with the bylaw and who council appointed. So an amending bylaw was approved by council, which changed the terminology contained within the bylaw from designated officer to clerk. And then council, subsequent to that, appointed the Oldman River Regional Services Commission as the body that will serve as the designated clerk. So that item's already been looked after. Then on page 59, under discretionary bylaws, the procedural bylaw, our action item here is that legal counsel has been directed to review the current council procedural bylaw so it can be properly amended to address and ensure compliance with the MGA with respect to how meetings are canceled, councillor participation, recorded votes, and committee establishment. This exercise will take place in the first 8 weeks of next council term to see if the new council wishes to make any other additional changes to the bylaw in addition to the areas that were flagged by municipal affairs. So just to close the loop on that bylaw. Okay, almost there. Page 63, under the bylaw revisions and amendments, they noted that we didn't have a bylaw that authorized the CAO or designated officer to consolidate one or more bylaws in accordance with section 69(1) of the Municipal Government Act. And looking at what is done in other communities, as well as a couple of sample templates that we received, the most pragmatic way to approach this would be to amend the council procedural bylaw to include clerical, typographical, and grammatical errors in bylaws may be corrected by the Department of Legislative Services. And the Department of Legislative Services may consolidate a bylaw by incorporating all amendments into one bylaw. So this will help declutter some of the agenda items that you would have seen in the past where we had to take every last amendment to council. This clarifies the areas where administration is able to have some latitude in that area. Section 4, municipal accounts, on page 68. We needed to have a formal resolution appointing our financial institution. So that was done on June 28th, 2021. And council approved BMO Bank of Montreal as the town's financial institution. And that was following a competitive request for proposal process. And then almost there, page 87, Subdivision and Development Appeal Board. It was noted that we didn't file a statistical return in 2020. The town of Coaldale's 2020 statistical information return did not report on the SDAB nor the status of the members as required by Section 3 of the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board regulation. So I can confirm that the participating town members as well as the clerk have all completed the required training. The statistical information return for 2021, which will be submitted in 2022, will include reference to this statistic moving forward. And the final one, this is the 10th one, but it's actually, it was an oversight by Municipal Affairs. They indicated that we did not meet the legislative requirements with respect to the listing and publishing policies that are used to make planning decisions. What they recommended for an action item is that the website for the town be updated to include a document summarizing the policies and their relationship to each other in accordance with legislative requirements. This is something that we had on our website that Municipal Affairs missed as part of their review. So we've since spoke to them. We sent them a link to this area of the website, and they indicated that it's sufficient. So the follow-up item on this part is that the website for the town does have a dedicated section for planning and community development that summarizes the policies, bylaws, and supporting resources. It was noted that Municipal Affairs did not note this in their initial review of the website, but has since indicated it was more than sufficient in meeting the MGA requirements. This section of the town's webpage has been live since April 2021. The other item that I didn't include, but it is in here, is we needed a resolution by council to designate the town of Coaldale office building, 1920 17th Street, as the designated town office building. That wasn't complete, so we had to look at that. And council had since made a motion to include that designation. So I'm happy to entertain any questions from council. I have submitted this action report to Municipal Affairs, and I don't anticipate it taking much time into next term to deal with some of the last remaining loose ends with respect to this matter.
Okay, thanks for walking us through that, Kalen. Is there any questions of council? Councillor Chapman?
Well, thank you, Worship. More of a comment than a question. I counted, what, 12 out of 60 points that would be, that they would have pointed out, but 12 is certainly shows the hard work that you're doing in terms of your administration, and the 12 probably are more of a housekeeping rule. And I look forward to addressing the FCSS situation one and coming up. So work well done.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Lloyd?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think it's an excellent report. Do you have any comparisons to how other communities would compare with this?
Through the chair to Councillor Lloyd, not offhand. I did speak with some other CAOs who work for communities that are under populations of, I believe, 2,500. And this municipal accountability program is something that they continuously have to look at, just given their size as a municipality. And they did kind of chuckle when they asked, well, what are some of the gaps that they found for you guys? And then before I could answer the question, they said, oh, did they get you on the location of the town office and the banking institution? And it's like, oh, as a matter of fact, they did. And I think just looking at that anecdote, it shows that some of these issues that are in here are not that uncommon. They're also not significant issues. And speaking with Municipal Affairs, they said there were no materially significant items. These are just common loose ends that they find as a part of this process, and it's not going to take us much time or money to correct them.
So basically, it's a really good report.
Councillor Holm?
I was just going to say the same thing. Looks like a very good report. Looks like we're on top of making sure that we do the corrections as minor as that some of them are, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd move this report for information.
Okay, we have a motion by Councillor Holm to move your report for your information. Any other discussion? All the question, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay. And then we're on to item 8.1, new business, CRA authorized representative. And Kalen is here to speak on that matter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our Corporate Services Department is the department that is tasked with interfacing with Canada Revenue Agency for payroll remittances and other matters. And it does help to have authorized personnel to speak on behalf of the town when dealing with the CRA. And since Mr. Beauchamp is the town's chief financial officer, it's our recommendation the council pass a resolution appointing him as an authorized owner for the town of Coaldale. The business number here is included with the Canada Revenue Agency to give him authority to deal with inquiries from them regarding town matters.
Any questions through the administration? Councillor Chapman?
Is owner the required wording in that motion?
I believe so. I wish Kyle was here to confirm that, but they are fairly specific in their terminology, and I can only assume that this motion would have been drafted in consultation with the CRA to meet their requirements.
I would make that motion to authorize the addition of Kyle Beauchamp, Chief Financial Officer and Deputy CAO, as an authorized owner of the town of Coaldale, business number 108-125717 with the Canada Revenue Agency.
Okay, any discussion? Yeah, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. And I think Chief McEwen is hopefully he's still with us. I'm not sure if we timed out here, but oh, there you are. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, thank you for your patience.
Oh, no problem. I went on a call and came back in time. So
did you amend your call numbers then to reflect that?
No, I didn't. Sorry. I'm just going to share my screen before I get started here. All right. So, Mayor and members of Council, thanks for having me here tonight. I'm presenting a year-to-date report. I haven't been in front of you yet this year to present our statistics and happenings from our department, so I'm happy to do that for you here tonight. It's been a very busy year so far, which you're going to see from the presentation here. So we'll just kind of start off with our call stats. This is showing combined calls from Coaldale and Lethbridge County. Blue column being medical and orange being fire. So right now, this is current up until the end of September. So we're at 385 calls, which is quite high with 3 months left remaining in 2021. So if we kind of continue on this trajectory as far as calls this year, we could likely see 500, which would be obviously another record for us. So that's kind of where we're anticipating ending our year up, is up around that 500 level if things kind of keep up here. This chart here just kind of shows calls per month. You can see things kind of really started to ramp up in June. And as everything kind of opened up for summer, we definitely did get busy. So we were right around 50 calls averaging over the summer. And then September came and we did 64 calls in September, which was our busiest month on record. 37 medical calls and 27 fire. We were going to lots of medical calls in town, lots of COVID-19 calls in town for sick people in Coaldale at that time. Compare that to September of last year, we did 39 calls in September of 2020. So quite an increase this year. So we were averaging in this year per month 36 calls. And then obviously we had that anomaly here in September. So we'll kind of see what happens with the last few months. Last year we averaged 45 calls from October to the end of December. So if we see anything like we saw last year, we'll be well over that 500 mark. Total calls between the town of Coaldale and Lethbridge County, we've done 252 calls to date in the town of Coaldale and 133 in Lethbridge County. Again, usually the higher number in town is strictly due to medicals, where we do quite a bit. This next chart will show the hours. So although we've done quite a few less calls in the county, we have put in quite significant amount of hours this year. There's been some large fires in the county this year where our volunteers have spent many hours. For example, the Green Prairie fire, we were there for 19 hours straight. So if you kind of add that up with a couple other long duration hay fires, the hours in the county definitely bump up quite a bit. So with our 252 calls in the town of Coaldale, this is pretty standard for what we see. It's typically about a 70-30 split between medicals and fire calls. So 81 fire calls in town, 171 medical calls in town to date. And this is very typically the same that we see as well in the county. It's almost the complete opposite. 70% fire calls, 30% medical calls in the county. Calls by type. So we have medical alarms, which would be smoke alarm, CO alarm, fires, MVCs, mutual aid calls, and other, which would be electrical hazards, gas leaks, fire investigations, stuff like that. So in total, we're doing 54% of all of our calls are medical. Alarms are 12%, which is good to see. Last year, 19% of our calls were alarms. So it's good to see that number go down, as majority of those calls are false alarms. So we don't want too many of those happening. Fire calls are up quite a bit. So 16% of our calls this year have been fires so far. Last year, for the whole year, only 9% of our calls were fires. So we've seen a lot more fires this year, partly due to the very dry and hot summer that we had. Our structure fires this year to date are up 19%, and our outside wildland fires are up 35% as compared to last year. So definitely a busy year for fires, and that dry summer definitely had something to do with that. Our firefighter hours to date, so 3,260 hours. So this is firefighter volunteer hours that have been put in. So a little bit higher in the county so far, again, with some of those long duration events that we've done this year. Regular training hours, 2,247 so far. Code reds, definitely something we're still keeping an eye on with the current state of EMS in Alberta. We are starting to see another increase in code reds. So 23 so far year to date. We are doing more and more calls with the city of Lethbridge in Coaldale. Our crews are out of town or timed out a significant, amount of time. So we are doing a lot of calls with Lethbridge. The other night we had no ambulances Coaldale, no ambulances in Lethbridge, no ambulances in Pitcher Butte, Tabor, Raymond, and the closest ambulance was coming to Coaldale from Brooks. So luckily a Tabor unit cleared up leaving the city, and they were able to come to a call in Coaldale. So that's just a quick snapshot of EMS in the province right now is struggling to keep up, and it's not getting any better, that's for sure. So something we need to continue keeping an eye on, keep talking about, and with our next council that's coming in, something we need to continue lobbying AHS for is the state of EMS. Fire prevention and public education. So we're back out in the community lots doing fire inspections, back on our regular fire inspection program. We've done 113 to date in the town of Coaldale, and with our new agreement with Lethbridge County, we are responsible for doing fire inspections in our primary response area in Lethbridge County. So quite a few hours are going into building that list and trying to figure out what's all out there, because there's not great records of what type of businesses and all that stuff are out there. So we're kind of building that from scratch in our program. So our team has put in a lot of work doing that. So far we've done 11 in Lethbridge County, and that'll continue to ramp up. Fire investigations, we've done 7 in town, and we've done 8 in Lethbridge County. So that's another portion which we're responsible for now, which we had talked about for quite some time. So it's nice to see that in the new fire agreement. so we can actually complete the fire investigations in Lethbridge County in our area, and then submit an invoice to Lethbridge County to be paid for our time for doing that. Home safety inspections we've done 2 in town, and we've replaced some smoke alarms for free to the public. We've done about 4. The latest restrictions kind of came in right before Fire Prevention Week, which kind of, again, messed up our plans to have an open house here. We had a bunch of school students booked to come to the fire hall, but with some of the local schools on outbreak alerts and stuff like that, we decided it was best to probably keep everyone out from coming to the hall. But we did send out 1 firefighter out to some of the schools. So we did hit some of the ones there, and we visited 5 kindergarten classes, gave out some goodie bags, did some fire education with the kids, and did a coloring contest with the kids. So tried to do as much as we could with kind of the restrictions that we were living with. Lots of certified courses that we were able to get through this year from Wildland. 1521 was a safety officer's course. We were able to send a couple people up to do vehicle electrification in large vehicles. In Nisku, we've done some kind of joint training with Sterling, which we haven't done a whole lot with them in the past, so it's kind of nice to start building some other relationships that way. We just completed the NFPA 1006 course, which is Technical Rescue Awareness. The picture to the left is us on testing day. We were at the old reservoirs in Coaldale and doing some low slope rescue. So a lot of these skills we never had formally trained on before, so it's nice to get this training down here. A few people taking mental health first aid. We had 10 new recruits start this year, and Deputy Chief Ruppberg and Fire Training Officer McGill put together a new recruitment training program, which worked out really well. So we ran this class of 10 through for the first time, which is about 2.5 months of training in Coaldale here at the hall before they actually get a pager and become operational. I think it was a huge benefit to do that training first. And we heard positive remarks from the volunteers back from that. We have lost 2, which is kind of to be expected out of a class of 10. So we're down to 8 from that class, but we picked up some really good people. Our officers just recently recertified in Blue Card Command. So we have to recertify in that every 3 years. In that 3 years, there's also 36 hours of continuing education that we have to accomplish. So we had to do that and then spend some time in a classroom to get recertified as incident commanders for fire. So that's done. And some of the new recruits are now moving on to their level 1 firefighter training and hazmat awareness and ops. And some of our newer people from the last year or 2 are moving on to level 2. So we have 7 of those going this fall. So still lots of training happening. Some of the highlights, I guess, from this year, we met all the requirements from the Fire Service Training Program grant, which Pitcher Butte was the grant holder this year. Coaldale was for the last one. So we got $25,000 to conduct training out of that grant. So just kind of looking at some of the stats from that, we were able to train in the region, 114 firefighters received training through 8 different certification courses. So that was a success. I will mention that was the last year of the grant. That fire training grant has been cut by the province. The fire hall completion and move-in is done finally. So we're all moved in and happy. Beautiful building. It's been working out really well for us, and you've all had a tour here now, so that's great. Our one capital project we just finished was the self-contained breathing apparatus compressor, the fill station. So we have that moved in. We sold the old one on trade, and I got about $8,500 back from that. So that project was completed on budget. It's up and running. I do have a picture of it in the slideshow just to visualize. Mental health program is ongoing. We've used about 5 sessions so far. Firefighter fitness program, it's been a bit of a challenge just with the restrictions and the gym closing, opening and closing again. But we are continuing to support that. And I think that's quite important now to support our local business as they try to, work their way back up from the lockdowns. And volunteer firefighter tax credit, business credit. This year we had 22 volunteer firefighters that were eligible, and we paid out $18,400. And we had 5 local businesses that were eligible, and we paid out $4,000 to the business for that credit. So we finished just under budget there. We had budgeted $25,000 for that credit. For this year, we finished at $22,400. One thing I do want to look at going forward is the criteria that lets the businesses get eligible. I think we might need to lower the hours a little bit just so the businesses can qualify for a little bit of a bigger portion of that credit. A couple other things. The Coaldale Volunteer Firefighters Association put up $17,000 to buy a piece of rescue equipment, which is a combi tool. It's kind of like the jaws of life and a cutter into one. So we always like to have a backup tool for vehicle extrication on one of our other trucks in case our primary rescue is busy on a call. So this way now we have some capacity to respond to MVCs and do vehicle extrication if there's 2 calls at once, which tends to happen sometimes. Kate Andrews Fire and Emergency Services Academy. So you've noticed the name change with that. It's no longer just the Fire Academy, it's Fire and Emergency Services, just to appeal to a broader demographic, I guess. Some people aren't fully bought in just on the fire. They're more interested on medical. So this way it just kind of markets a little bit to everything. So we're in our 3rd year of the program. We're doing the NATE Medical First Responder course. We had a full class of 18, which is amazing. We've never had that many. Yeah, we've lost 2, but to be expected. People don't know how much work it is. So we're down to 16, but that's going very well so far. Work experience volunteer. We have a 2nd year Fire Academy student that's going to be volunteering some time with us starting tomorrow. So he's doing that through Palliser Beyond Borders to get high school credits. So we get him for a couple mornings a week. So that's going to be really good. He's done his fire training already, so he kind of knows what we do here and can definitely jump in and help out. We bought a Zodiac boat from Lethbridge Fire, who had decommissioned it, kind of thing. It was past their life expectancy and sitting in fleet. So we had some money that was donated to the association, about $3,000 from a local group. They decided it would be a good purchase to get something like that. We've talked a lot about water rescue capacity in the region, and really aside from the city of Lethbridge, there isn't any. And with the increase in calls that we're seeing at Stafford, Park Lake, Kehoe Lake, some of the other lakes in the region, it's something us fire chiefs have talked about for quite some time that it would be nice to get. So we saw this as a really great opportunity to get a still good boat with a trailer and everything for $1,800. So that is at the hall right now, and we're planning to do some training on that next year. The Town of Coaldale and Lethbridge County Fire and Rescue Service Agreement, that was renewed for 3 years on April 1st. That had some key parts in it. I kind of talked about the fire inspections and fire investigations. So that was a big one that we have been talking to Lethbridge County about for a number of years. So I think that's a big one for us that can help us get out in the county a little bit more, do some inspections, and on the flip side, bring in some additional revenue. And also the agreement has a part in there about expanded territory. So that is still on the table, and hopefully we can engage further with Lethbridge County on that in the near future. Going back to kind of June, we did have the graduation from the first 2 years of the Kate Andrews Fire Academy. So that was really great to see and well attended here at the hall. Couple pictures for you. So that's what the boat currently looks like. So that's parked in our hall right now behind my command truck there. So we're hoping to get that out at least once this year just to make sure everything's good on it, but it looks great. We've had the motor up and running and it's holding air, so it's perfect. On the right there is the breathing air compressor and fill station. This has been really great for us. Our previous fill station and compressor was from 1995. So got a lot of use out of that thing, served our department quite well. But with us going to the new SCBA cylinders that are a higher pressure, our old compressor and fill station struggled to keep up with that higher pressure. So the three yellow bottles you can see on the right there, that's the storage system for air. We only had 2 before. So now with the additional bottle, gives us quite a bit more volume so we can fill our tanks quicker. So that's been working out really well, saving our volunteers a lot of time when we get back from a big fire. On the left, I'm just showing the new logo for the Kate Andrews Fire and Emergency Services Academy. So we just blended in a little bit of EMS with the Star of Life there. And the tool, sorry, I guess I got to move once in a while. The Hearst Combi tool that the association bought is on the right there. So, and that's on the Quint, the ladder truck. A couple of pictures, just the Kate Andrews graduation from back in June on the left. That was the class that graduated. We had 6 of those kids completed the full 2 years. One is back this year for the MFR, and he's our volunteer that starts tomorrow. And on the right is Andy, and she was presented with the Captain Wilson Award. It was the first award that we developed for excellence in fire and emergency services. She was going off to Lakeland College to do her post-secondary education in fire. We were able to celebrate the life of Captain Wilson in August 20th, 2021 here at the hall, which a lot of us had been waiting for, I guess, to finally give him a proper send-off and you know, give him what he deserved as far as a full fire department funeral. So that was well attended from departments from all over Alberta. So it was a great day to remember what he contributed to our department and our community. Looking ahead for next year. So the first thing I'll kind of talk about there is the technical rescue team. So through Pitcher Butte Emergency Services, they were awarded $50,000 from an occupational health and safety related court decision. And the money was supposed to go towards some type of building up and training and equipment of technical rescue. So technical rescue, there's a bunch of different specialized teams and stuff like that, different skills in the fire service. So rope rescue being one of the big ones, and confined space and water rescue is something that we're looking at. So through that initial $50,000, Pitcher Butte has asked us to kind of come on board and spearhead a project to develop a regional technical rescue team. So it's a huge opportunity, again, something we've talked about at the Joint Chiefs Committee level for a number of years. I think the idea is, again, the city of Lethbridge is typically the only department around here that has a lot of the equipment and training for some of these rescues and incidents. So building up some capacity and increased capabilities for the regional departments, I think is hugely beneficial for us to become more self-reliant and less reliant on calling out the city for everything. The city does a great job and they're well trained, but we know they're fairly expensive and they can take a long time to get to where you need them to go. So I think this is a huge benefit for the region and something we'll be coming back to council with in the future to hopefully get some support for this as we move forward. And we'll be presenting to Lethbridge County to get their support for this regional team as well. Just as far as capital, next year, not much. We got a command truck that needs to be replaced. With the Zodiac, we are going to bring in a third-party training organization to do some boat training, so everyone has the proper training to operate that. We're going to be doing more pre-plans in town and more in the county as we're out there doing fire inspections. We're going to kind of do two things at once and get some pre-plans built. Summer student placement, that would be on top of the volunteer position and something we're going to bring to council for discussion come operating budget, just to see if we can get the Kate Andrews student here for the summer months as a summer student placement. Kind of last couple things we need to finish off with the fire hall, which we had dropped previously as a cost savings measure that we hope to get completed next year. And again, kind of a budget item, but to pave our parking lot and to get a swale, grading for the swale in the back. Something that's coming down the line is a new records management system. The city has moved away from FDM. We currently use FDM to do all of our reports and stuff like that. It's being provided by Lethbridge County for free right now, but FDM is going to be no longer. There's no more support for that system. So we're going to have an opportunity again to jump on and piggyback with City of Lethbridge and Lethbridge County, and hopefully for a good price. I mean, you can't beat free, but we need a better system as well, because what we're using isn't quite user-friendly. So that'll be coming down the line. Some additional strategic planning, of course, once the new council gets in, trying to figure out what their priorities and initiatives will be. And I have a fire service bylaw that needs updating that we'll be working on as well, kind of going forward and hopefully finishing next year. So that's it for my presentation. Thank you for listening. Happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Well, thank you, Chief McEwen, for the presentation, and always a source of pride for myself, and I'm sure all of council, to hear from our Coaldale District Emergency Services and all the great work. And it always astounds me at all the volunteer hours and training and work that your department does, and just the incredible community outreach and volunteers buying your own equipment. It's just a wonderful department. So it's a very big source of pride for myself over the years. So I want to commend you and your department for everything that you do, that's for sure. Any members of council want to ask any questions or comment? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. And I would just truly like to echo Mayor Craig's comments here, and just thank you, Chief, for all of your work, and to your department and volunteers that have stepped up, and of course all the Kate Andrews students who are making such a difference in education and what those kinds of partnerships and collaborations really can do in our community. And you've set the bar really well for that. Also want to thank you as well, Chief, for opening up the fire hall for a couple of events, including the Celebrate Maine festivities there. I thought it was just a brilliant location for for hosting that kind of a pancake breakfast and having Rachel Harder and of course Grant Hunter there as well to serve pancakes for the public. It was really nice, and of course a tribute and a farewell to Captain Wilson was a good opportunity to be together in your facility there. I wanted to just ask you about one or a couple of things here. In your budget for the coming future, are you thinking about having an addition of that bush buggy or that buggy that you brought in from the blood reserve there as part of your fleet?
Through to Councillor Chapman, it's not something that we're looking at right now. Those are definitely versatile pieces of equipment though, and would be beneficial for someone to have somewhere in the county, I think. And that could be a talk at the Joint Chiefs level as well to figure out what department or what location would have the best utilization of a piece of equipment like that. But yeah, that thing was great for what we were doing with it.
Yeah, I would encourage you to continue with those talks, and of course that's part of your collaboration with the county. Just in closing, I would also like to share with you and with Council that the museum board last week passed a motion to donate back the old handheld or hand-pulled fire tank that was on a cart, and they'd like to donate it back to the fire hall. And the board trusts that this tool of years gone by can be preserved along with other parts of the department's memorabilia. So that's a token from the museum board to the Fire Hall Association.
Great.
Any other members of council? I entertain a motion to receive that very comprehensive report for information with our thanks. Councillor Lloyd?
I'd just like to say thank you very much for keeping us safe and for all the work you do, and I'd like to make the motion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor? Yeah, that's carried unanimously, and thank you for your patience tonight, Chief.
Absolutely, and thank you very much. And I'd just like to say, it's been a pleasure to work alongside you and serve you to try to get some of our initiatives built up here, like the fire hall and the ladder truck over the last few years. So we really appreciate your support. It's always good to know that we have good counselors on here that support the emergency services, and more importantly, really support the volunteers and recognize the businesses and all the sacrifices that they make. So thank you very much, and good luck to all of you in the future.
Thank you. Good. Okay, and then we're down to the next item of business. Don't want to be a limelight hog on SAWA having two back-to-back meetings, but just they did close the request for expressions of interest, and they got all of the 29 drawdowns of information. They got 3 really substantial responses as per the report. Very large corporations in the waste energy field. So it's very exciting to get that acknowledgement from that industry. Those are players that are involved in up and running facilities all around the world. So it is exciting times for SAWA, and to ensure that they can move forward, the County of Newell has agreed to be a funding manager if they're successful in getting any ACP grants. And I just really like it if council could pass a resolution to submit the requested a letter of support as per the template in my item 10.1. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Chapman?
Again, thank you so much, Mayor, for all your years of service with SEWA. And with that, I'd also like to make the motion to issue a letter of support.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, seeing that, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's carried unanimously. So thank you very much, Council, for that support. And then we're moving into, there's nothing under section 11, and we have section 12. Okay. Councillor Holm?
I'd move both those for information.
Okay.
Both 12.1 and 12.2.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Holm moves 12.1 and 12.2 for information. Any discussion? Councillor White?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to the awards, please.
Okay. Okay, let's just deal with the motion for 12.1 and 12.2 then. And
right.
12.3 is there. So I'll call the question. All in favor of receiving 12.1 and 12.2 for information? Okay, and that's carried unanimously. And Councillor Lloyd, 12.3.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're very fortunate to have two of our members receive awards from the AUMA, where they'll be receiving them in November. Mayor Craig has received the Award of Excellence, and Councillor Chapman is a Distinguished Service Award. Both of these gentlemen are very well deserving. They're both community members and have done an amazing job in the town. Kim has also been on many provincial committees, including chair of the AUMA's Audit and Finance Committee, and SEWA, you just heard about that. And Bill's claim to fame, I guess, would be twinning of Highway 3. So we're very fortunate to be able to have these two gentlemen get these awards from the AUMA.
Thank you very much for those kind words. I'd entertain a motion to receive that for information. Councillor Simpson, all in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. And so the agenda didn't include any closed meeting items. So we don't need a motion to do any of that. And we're at the end of the public portion. So I would entertain a motion for adjournment. Councillor Balls, all in favor? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for a great term.
Good luck.
Thank you.